like to call to order the Board of Education meeting. This is a special meeting, Wednesday, April 10th, 2019. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack? Yes. We will be going into executive session. Executive session, may I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay.
Roll call.
Roll
Mr.
call.
Ziegler, yes. Just go down.
Mr. Peterson, yes.
Mrs. Mack? Yes.
Mr. Dosen, yes.
Mrs. Kramer, yes.
Yes. So this motion to go into executive session is for the consideration of the appointment, employment, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official per board policy 0166, item A. We will now be in executive session. Thank you. Can I have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler, yes. Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Mike Ziegler as President Pro Treasurer.
Pro Tem,
Treasurer.
President Pro Tem Treasurer.
which means I have to take the notes.
Do we need to vote on that?
Yes.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler, yes. Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 3, work session. We have item A, work session items. We're going to start with our TIF proposal discussion. And thank you, Mr. Riley, for joining us.
My pleasure. I did note on Cleveland.com this morning that there was a presentation to City Council recently. There was an article online on the TIF to the City Council of Brecksville. I did reach out to council who presented. I did not get a return call from him. He's with Squire Sanders out of their Columbus office. So I'm just to kind of talk about the process. What's a little, the statutes, again, for the edification of the public, a TIF is a tax incremental financing, where generally an entity doing a development, instead of paying all of their property taxes, puts it into fund to make public improvements that benefit the entire community. So roads, sewers, things of that ilk. Here what we're talking about is what's going to be known as Valor Acres, which is cardinal direction that way.
Yeah.
Due north by the old Veterans Administration. And what they're ultimately talking about, as presented at the last meeting, is approximately, knocking upwards of almost $500 million worth of improvements, 450-ish, give or take $1 or $2. Now remember, those are total cost numbers. That's not going to be the value of the property at the end of the day. And what they're proposing at the moment is a 75% tax abatement for 30 years. Which means they would pay 25% of the taxes that they would otherwise pay to the school district, and then they have an upfront payment as well, some cash up front, which is currently $250,000. The normal process under the statutes is the city makes a determination to grant the TIF and then provides a notice to the board that you have 30 days to object or agree, those kinds of things. What we're trying to do here is kind of figure everything out in terms of what the school district is comfortable with, so that when it gets to City Council, everything is set and we can waive the time period which is permitted in the statute. In my experience, what I often recommend, and I would recommend to you, is we try to get as large an upfront payment as possible. That we try to move as much money up front, because then you know you have it. I have no idea, I am in no position to judge, and I don't know any of us are, whether the project will take off. We certainly hope it does. but you don't know what's going to happen with the real estate market. We all remember less than 10 years ago, I guess, the recession of 07, 08, 9, 10, 11. Depending upon what you experienced, the recession lasted for a fairly long period of time, but real estate development basically stopped in the region for a period of time. That could happen again. I have no way of knowing, so I generally like to get as much cash up front as possible so that we're locked in, we're guaranteed money, and we don't have to worry about the if come as to when the project happens. Well, I guess a couple of questions to the board. Any questions on the presentation last week, or any questions about TIFs generally?
No.
Okay. Is that a strategy you're comfortable pursuing, which is maybe, I'm even more comfortable giving up something on the back end. 30 years from now, I'll give up some cash in order to get it up front.
Are we in agreement on that?
Yeah, I mean, it makes an awful lot of sense, because what's the time frame? They were even talking about a long enough time frame to develop.
2 years from when they start, but remember, before they start, they have to get a financing in place. And they're likely going to do a multi-layer, my guess. There's certainly 2 layers to the TIF financing, because they want to invoke 570940 and 570941. So revised code sections. For those nerdy enough to read the revised code, I do with gusto and pleasure on a regular basis. But it's not everybody's cup of tea, which I understand. But that's the TIF financing, so that gets them roads, sewers, but then they have to either get tenants or build on spec. And my guess is they want to sign long-term leases with folks so that they know they have a revenue stream coming in. And then they've either got to borrow money or finance it in some way, advance their own funds. I don't know how long that will take. And the other issue with the development is, what's the critical mass when you have enough that people will locate there? Who wants to be first? I think it's a great location. Brecksville's a great community. There's not a lot between Rockside and Route 18, I think, is probably the next major. So you're kind of right between those 2 locations. It should be very successful, but I don't know when, and they won't know when.
Yeah, and that time period.
There's a lot of variables.
Yeah, economies.
Anything else? No, so next steps.
Well, I will reach out to their counsel. They're using Gigi Benjamin at Calfee. I know her. Have a conversation about some options, but try to say we need more upfront, and we're willing to be flexible on some of the other terms, but we really want more upfront money. And I'll identify a number that I think is reasonable. What they've offered is not unreasonable given other transactions. I want to make sure that's clear. It's similar to what Crocker Park did, and they gave a number of transactions that are similar. The one in Pepper Pike is escaping my memory. But they've done it, it's similar to those deals, but I think this is also somewhat unique in terms of its location and its potential to them. And they're asking for a fair amount. I mean, we haven't done a lot. I think the district has one small TIF outstanding in Broadview Heights. That's almost at the end, but this is not something that's common for at least this community.
And then you'll come back to the board?
Hopefully we'll have something in place for you to consider on the 24th.
That'd be wonderful.
Right.
Okay.
Because they're under, they're trying to get this locked down sooner rather than later, which certainly understand. I get the sense if the Cleveland.com article is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it's inaccurate or accurate, I just take it, it seems like the city is still in the middle of a process that they're going through in terms of, one of the quotes from the mayor was, getting proposals from council to represent them. You have to get that done before you start getting into all the other issues. And it's unclear even if they're going to the city of Brecksville to issue the debt associated with the TIF, or if they're going to go to the Port Authority. They've been talking both as potential options. So it sounds like the city's not 100% ready yet, but the developers were hoping for a decision in April.
So what's our obligation? We do not vote on this. So when you come on the 24th, you'll tell us What
Yeah, you'll
happened?
vote on the 24th, we'll have a proposal, or you can vote against it or give additional direction. You know, we'll try to strike what we think is the best deal. And if you think it's a good deal for the taxpayers of your community, you can vote for it. If you think it's not a good deal, you can vote against it.
All right. Anything else?
Okay, and we'll try to get it to you, and it'll be an agreement. So we'll try to get it done, you know, by Wednesday or Thursday, so you have a chance to read it before you get it. You know, it suddenly shows up.
Right, I was going to say that we'll get a chance to review it before our meeting
Yes.
and ask questions if
That
there's
would
any
be my
questions. or
aspiration,
whatever.
and if not, then we'll just discuss it on the 24th and vote the following month. But they were the developer wants to get something in place by the end of April, and we're trying to accommodate that. I don't know if the city's going to be ready based upon the article. Okay?
All right, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Riley.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Second item on our work session is our facility renovations and permanent improvement planning. Mr. Code, thank you for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So this is a follow-up to our discussion at the board meeting
Yes.
for direction on how that money should be spent that's left over after we build our P through
Yes,
5 building.
Well, let me just make sure, you know, I think what the objective for the board is to try to put a stake in the ground as far as how much money do we want to reserve out of the $44.5 million, which there's another $1 million you can throw onto that for interest as we're going through this process for these needed repairs and improvements, which would then back up into how much can you spend for the school, the new building, which we can then give better direction to TDA and Shook.
Thank you, Mark. And if you've sat on the PI committee, you've seen this cover picture before, right? I used this one a couple of times. That is the roof here at the high school. I was asked to prioritize, so the very last slide we'll see tonight will be priorities. And again, you've sat on the PI committee, roofing is a priority for the district. The first slide is an indication of our high school projects. This information was derived from the 2016 Facilities Master Plan performed by GPD, and then 2017, prior to the employment of TDA, we aligned the GPD Master Plan pricing that they had presented with what we had identified as our priorities. This is reformatted. Some of the information will show up slightly different, and I will point that out when we get to that. But this is virtually the same information that we've been discussing since about 2017. Roof repairs again here at the high school. The plastic water lines here at the high school. Asphalt, carpet replacement in the building. And then what we've done is we've backed out a couple of items that we have alternative funding sources available to the district to address, which would be a controls project on our HVAC systems, and then with security being a very high priority, and not just this school district, but all schools, this year we will have addressed this item. This item showed up in the 2017 plan. This summer we will have fully updated all of our video cameras and CCTV system to IP address digital systems. And so moving forward, if we identify a hotspot, we're adding a camera. So the middle school, the high school, all the elementaries as well, at entrances and in front of office areas, so anywhere we have public access directly into the school, the elementaries, and the stadium, and the Board of Education building has received CCTV updates within the last couple of years.
Sorry, Chris, real quick, can you just give a quick explanation on House Bill 264 project?
Yes, I will. I am actually going to do that at the end because on the last slide, I combined both the middle school and the high school, and I address potential or possible funding available or a scope financially in one of those slides as well. If that'd be okay.
Sure, thanks.
Again, this is a similar format that we've been using. Roofing is at the top. We have been working on some of these actively. We've had TDA involved in looking at this. Again, security being a very, very high priority for the district. We've been exploring the security vestibule. When I indicate that there are some differences, this would be an item that is different than what GPD had initially communicated, and it's a different, or it's a benefit to the school district, because GPD had this at just over $500,000, and we looked at it, potentially scale it back a little bit from what GPD had envisioned, but we get a secure vestibule so that folks can't just walk directly into the middle school with this item. We need to do some windows at the middle school, and we have the generator. And then again, we have alternate funding sources, and we are looking at doing the fire alarm system replacement at that building sooner rather than later. We've had some difficulties over there. We have a letter coming from the fire marshal to request us to move forward in this in lieu of doing some other work at the school. This number came in from GPD in 2016 at $150,000. And so as you can see, utilizing the OFCC guide based upon our square footage, we are estimated at 300. It actually, if you do the math here, it comes in about 270. So we have built in a little bit of flexibility. And then again, we have alternative funding sources with the Houseville project to address not just the controls, but also some mechanical system needs at the middle school. Our total is now at 225. Again, we will combine these slides in a later slide and give us a grand total to look at for all improvements. Are there any questions about that so far? Good. And then our athletic complex. Tennis courts, if we move forward with the proposal to put 2 courts at the city site, the $90,000 per court that's been communicated, that's $180,000. This was a shocker, the $500,000 to resurface the track. I don't know if you can see that, where my light is.
Yep.
That is a substructure crack in the asphalt, which requires this item right here, which you can see is driving that cost at $350 a square foot. So if you are on the track and you look around, you are going to identify a number of cracks. I must say that this track has held up really well. I am not sure how old it is. It's 10 plus years. 10 years is the life expectancy on a track of this nature. And I would look at TDA and have them confirm 10 years on a track surface is right there, isn't it?
It's 7 to 10.
7 to 10, and this is in excess of 10 years. I've been able to confirm that. So the track is an item similar to the turf that has a life expectancy that we just need to pay close attention to. This number had come in budgeted initially at $150,000, and I think that was based on being able to apply a structural surface spray and not have to do any base work, any substructure, no paving. So that's significantly higher. And then we have continuously look at ways to improve storage at the high school, and that was identified in 17 as well as a priority. This is our combined list. When we talked about this internally recently, I was requested to force rank them priority. And I have roofing as a priority. And again, if you sit in the PI committee, I think I lead with roofing almost every meeting. That's where we have spent a lot of our PI funds in the past 3 years. Again, the CCTV update is in process. That will be completed. It's coming out of PI funds. That's why you're showing a zero balance there, because it's coming out of any drain on the bond funding. We would like to do the fire alarm this summer, and with the board's interest or express interest in a fire alarm, we would get a resolution on the agenda even this month to move forward with that replacement this summer. Tennis courts, again, very high priority. Those are strictly bond funds that we would use for that. Again, that's on the city site. High school and middle school HVAC mechanical systems and DDC control systems. There's a really good opportunity in the school district. Our last house school project was performed in 2012. The district started paying, because you were able to borrow money on a House Bill 264 project against the savings identified from electrical or gas or any energy. And then you use the savings that you're generating from the lighting update. It was what we did in 2012. And it was $250,000 approximately a year that project cost the district. That actually comes off the books next year. So our last annual payment for our 2012 project is next year. We started paying on that in 13. That's a 7-year payoff on that project. House Bill 264 doesn't just do lighting, it does updated mechanical systems, because if you look at old air conditioning systems, they do not function nearly as efficiently as a new air conditioning system. And then the controls allow us to increase savings by controlling the ventilation and temperature of the space a lot more consistently. If you recall, when we go back to our facilities engagement, we are running our controls today with a modem device, if you recall that, which gives you an idea of how antiquated our current DDC control systems are. I don't know that a modem's been around for 10 or 15 years. I'm not familiar. I'm going to stop there and make sure that everybody understands the House Bill 264 in that process, that we are allowed to borrow money against savings generated by doing energy projects. So for instance, in this building, in this room, some of the brown lights, they're metal halide. They should be LED. We would include that in the project because it will help fund other improvements. And it reduces the drain on our bond fund. We have the plastic water lines at the high school. We have that access control vestibule, track resurfacing. We do need to do some windows. Asphalt and concrete is important. We do that every year, but this will help support some road replacement that if you were driving in, you probably noticed that we have some deteriorated roads. It was a very difficult winter this year on roads. Carpet replacement here at the high school, generator, and then the storage at the high school. These are our funding opportunities to help us address these matters. We have our annual permanent improvement fund. We've identified the $5.5 million in bond issue funds. We have the potential of the TIF, the House Bill project. We've estimated that we could should probably address about $1.5 million worth of energy projects. We have some central school operating expense savings. I did have a conversation with Jeff. This is exclusive of any personnel issues. This is straight utilities and purchase services and et cetera. So this excludes personnel. We do get grants regularly. I'm hoping to get this grant. I haven't got it yet. We're 12 weeks into the application process. This will help us with some additional work in the security area. And then we also have the potential that we can sell Chippewa or Highlands properties. The only value that I was able to be comfortable with is the land value identified by the county auditor, and we provided that information to the board in 17 as well.
Chris, we
Yes,
can't
sir.
use that operating expense.
Pardon me?
We can't use that operating expense for capital, right? I mean, the 340.
You could, the operating expense can be used however you choose. I mean, you can't use it for capital improvement. You could use it for
Yeah, I don't think you
general operations. If you go into the general fund, that would be a board decision.
I think we need to use it for operating. I'm pretty sure we can't use that for capital improvements, but
Well, the other problem with that is we don't have the final impact of transportation on Central yet either.
yeah, no, I agree. I'm just
Yeah.
saying operating. I think we
Right.
have to keep, yeah.
Your question was very timely, Mike.
I was jumping the gun.
Are there any other questions from the board? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious on the slide 2 back where you rank the projects by that one. Which of those, the items on that list, have to be done like while the students are not in school?
Pretty much everything that can be done while school's in, but we would have to obviously close the track. And so that we couldn't be a track season, but I'm not seeing anything on there. Possibly the gym storage could be done during the school year. I would suggest possibly a majority of the generator work could be installed during the school year. But roof replacement you don't want to do while school is in session.
Plumbing.
We are not installing video while school's in session. Fire alarm, no. So tennis courts could be done, obviously, if they're at the city, that could be done during the normal school year.
Okay.
Good question. So the majority of our work is done in a 55-day window.
So if the board wanted to commit out of the, so just to recap, it's $44.5 million bond, but we're, conservatively projecting another $1 million of interest it's going to generate. So call it $45.5 million. If the board wanted to commit $4.5 million of that to these improvements, and I think there's about another $1 million for demolition of the 3 elementaries, the other 3 elementaries. So that'd be 5.5. That would leave us 40 million for the new school. So if we wanted to commit to this, that would set the budget or the cap on the new school at approximately 40 million, unless we wanted to do something different.
Trouble is, we don't know what the trade-offs are, and I wonder how much of this realistically can be either delayed or taken out of other PI funds. Because like you say, we have to do most of the work in the summer. Does it have to be this summer for some of it? That's all I'm saying. We can buy ourselves more cushion. Like I said, I think 40 to maybe 42. Sense that I don't know what we're trading for what is.
This summer, I am requesting the board to move forward with fire alarm replacement at the middle school. And I would like to have that resolution on the April 24th meeting to move forward with that. That is double the price estimated in 2017.
Yeah, I don't, on the timing of it, whether or not, I think for tonight, what we're trying to do is get to a number for TDA and Shook as to what's the new building. So if we wanted to reserve, and again, just if we wanted to reserve $4.5 million, it doesn't mean that all has to be spent this summer. It just means we're just reserving, we would just be reserving a part of this funding for these priorities. And I think, Mike, to your other point, when we spoke last, that Chris, I believe you had mentioned, Chris from TDA, that, you know, if the board supplied the number, which is our goal now, right? So if we land on a number like $40 million, and you get through that process, say, okay, we're gonna bring it into $40 million, and then you find out, like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to make some really major concessions to hit that number, there's an opportunity to come back to us and say, okay, now we have more detail, and here's what you would lose if you go to 40, but if you go to 41, then, you know, you don't have to make that. So it's not, you know, a decision by the board now to give direction is not in cement that says, well, you can't undo that, right? If we find out that, you know, we've got to make too many compromises on the new building, we could always revisit this and say, well, now we have more detail, you know, we got farther along in the process, we got more numbers in, we could always revisit it and say, let's allocate more money to the
Yeah, as long as it, yeah, like I said, now we're playing at a boundary, and just so we know what it means if we move the needle a little bit either way. Yeah.
Right.
Just a quick question, Chris. On that one number you gave us, you had a 10% contingency in it because you said it was 270, but you had 300 in there. Is that number about a 10% contingency? Just bulk, just so we have an idea of what, you know.
I would say there's some contingency funds built in there. Just from my knowledge, is I believe this number is low. 150,000. I don't know how much square footage we're going to get for $150,000 in an addition on this building. I am actively working with the high school principal to identify other storage options, and there are other storage options. They require a little bit of work and investment, but significantly less than $150,000, that I do believe will satisfy some of the majority of that need. The difficulty we have is any storage that we identify within the high school is not next to the gyms.
Yeah.
It's not. And so we're looking for gym storage specifically. So we can identify storage, and we can create storage, and we can push storage into other areas, but it's not gym storage. There are gym items that we can put in storage, not next to the gym, like
Wrestling mats in the
gymnastics,
summer.
or the wrestling mats, or the gymnastics, flooring, spring flooring. You know, we bring that out for a couple months a year. It doesn't have to sit in the cafeteria. Currently, it's stored in the cafeteria during the season. We're looking to identify someplace else because we store that downstairs, and it's very difficult to get up and down. Yes, ma'am.
Mark mentioned when he was asking his other question about $1 million to take down the
3 elementaries.
Like how certain is that number? And are we actually going to have to take down 3? Like,
So there's still conversation occurring about Hilton School and utilization of that space, and whether that whole building comes down or a portion of that building comes down. The estimate that was provided was through TDA, and I believe they're very confident in that. Was it 1.1 million that was identified for demolition?
Right.
for the 3 buildings?
For the 3.
Yeah, it's a little under $1 million. So if the board decides not to demolish Hilton, then you've got another $300,000 that you don't have to spend for that. So it could be closer to $600,000, just depending, 666.
Although if we don't demolish it, what are we doing with it, and then are we going to have operating costs for it? I mean, the thing is that, you know, you can get into any of these numbers and start playing around at the edges with them, right? There's probably movement on a number of these things, but ultimately, I think, you know, we have to land somewhere. I mean, these are, and I know in sitting through the PI meetings, right, the list is a lot longer than this. These are just the highest priority things, and, you know, that was part of the hope,
you know, to kind of go back to when we put the bond issue out, you know, when we originally were going to go for the bond issue, and you know, there was discussion, you know, there were the committee that came up with the plans, there was one with one school, one with two schools, and the one with two schools originally was favored. We didn't have enough money to accomplish it when the final numbers came in, which is how we backed into the one school option, because the two school option we couldn't afford, because our max of what we could get bond-wise, you know, was $44.5 million. And we talked about, let's try to go for the max so that we have buffer for the new school and we could knock off our highest priority items on our PI list. And so to me, it makes sense to take that $4.5 million as a nice round number, take $1 million for demolition, you know, that takes us, you know, that brings us to, you know, $40 million for the building. The new building was originally earmarked at $37.9. You know, if we go to 40, that's 2.1 million. I know the costs are higher. And then we can throw it back to, you know, the team, TDA and Shook and company to see where the numbers coming in. You know, can they get that down to 40? And what are the compromises? And if the compromises get to be too big, board has another chance to reopen it and say, okay, well, let's move some money around.
And again, you referenced the PI. My goal is every year to address what I can, so those high emergency items, similar to the fire alarm at the middle school, roofing is actively leaking, and we will do some roofing work this summer, but we'll just keep it under the bid limit. This would go through the construction manager at risk. And that's why it's not listed, because it is identified specifically coming from the PI. And those funds I checked today are in the PI. There is actually in excess of 300 in the PI account today.
Yeah, the other big variable, just, you know, as everybody probably recalls, is we have this whole question on transportation of when the new school opens. We know we're going to need additional buses. We don't know how many there are, but those are costly items, and so, you know, I think we need to be protective of our PI funds, you know, until we can get through some of this. You know, I would advocate for a more conservative approach and say let's allocate $4.5 million to these funds as the list is put up there, and, you know, land on maybe a $40 million target on the new school, and see what comes back from our team on you know, can they do it for 40, or, you know, is a compromise starting to get too high?
And it came up in conversation just momentarily. What is missing off this list is the interest that we're accruing, currently on the 44.5. Jeff has indicated a couple of times that's 1.5 million approximately, so that number does matter as well.
Chris Smith, currently right now, or Ryan, where we're at right now, without going through the second exercise of the value engineering, what is your anticipated cost right now as the building sits?
41.3.
Off the top of my head, I believe it's 41.3.
Right. So if we're sitting at, before that value engineering piece of it, going through it that second time, and, you know, we're looking at that, I mean, we're almost kind of right there. I would suggest that, you know, if that's where we're at right now, you know, looking at that and then value engineering it down just to go through that process before maybe the board lands on a specific number. Because, you know, again, once we go through that process and you take some of those things out, it might naturally get to that cost anyways. You know, if we're just in the middle of a process right now where we're not down to what that GMP will be because we haven't finished the process of getting down through design development.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if the estimate right now is 45, we'd have a different kind of problem.
Correct.
I think between the $4.5 million that Chris is looking for, the $1 million of interest, and the, you know, 44.5 we've got, having a 41 number right now, I think is probably, you know, I mean, when you say it's not accurate, we know it's not accurate, we just know it's kind of anyway, so that's close enough. That it's kind of a technical term. But,
Well, I thought at our last meeting, when we talked about this topic, I thought what I heard expressed was they'd like a number, right? I mean, land somewhere, right? Not just, well, it's
Right,
kind of
and that's what I'm
close.
saying, and I think landing where they are at 41.3 is fine.
That doesn't incent much to value engineer down.
No, but they're not, it's not a firm number yet,
Right.
is all I'm saying. They might have to engineer down later, because when they're done, they might say, now it's 42.5, and we go, well, we don't want to go there.
Now,
Chris, you're here.
choose.
What are you looking for?
Yeah, okay, so, pulling up my shirt here. So, I think that the $41.2 million is based on an old design. I mean, it's based on schematic design. It was done so long ago. The building's changed so much. What I'd like to do is to finish the design development, get that in the hands of the estimators, look at what exactly the design is, what it costs now, present to you in June with what that budget is, what those costs are, and ways to get back. If you want to cut, there's ways to get back to 40 million, 38 million, whatever we can come up with. And then put the decision in front of the board before we move into the GMP documents. That's what I would suggest. And then you can, now, I would also suggest, I'm sorry for stepping on theirs, but if there's a summer project that affects safety and security, that, the fire alarm, for example, how much was that? 300,000, and you think you can push forward with that, do that, and then cut us loose on that, and then maybe defer the rest of next summer or something.
So you don't need a firm number today. Then you said if you just finish up this next phase, you'll hone in on a better number, and then potentially come up with some options if we want to bring that number down.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we would love a hard number right now, I just think it's on a set of drawings that are 4 months old. So I really think that our June presentation, and we can get you information before the June presentation. So we'll get you information leading up to that to the board on where we stand, how we're looking at getting back in the budget. We have those discussions in our core meetings, so if you participate in those core meetings, then you'll be very well with us. So no shock when you get to the board meeting.
You're on camera.
Wait.
Are there any other questions?
No, thank you
Thank you.
for presenting that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. So we're going to transition to our next part of this meeting, which is item 4, our pre-K through 5 elementary construction stakeholder engagement forum. So I've invited Chris from TDA, right? Okay, Chris, to give a recap presentation where we're at in this process. After he's given that presentation, I want to make sure that the availability for everybody in the community, teachers, to ask questions. The board, the board had their opportunity 2 weeks ago, so this is about you. I know a couple people are going to be speaking on behalf of certain entities, and I'm hopeful by the end of this meeting that we have got good direction. It's important for the board to hear from you, because this is a partnership, and so we have to be sure that we get this right. If you have something to say, now's your time. Okay? All right, so we're going to start this. This is the only topic of conversation today. It's this building. So if we have another topic, we have a Board of Education meeting in 2 weeks. That will be our next meeting on that. Okay? So without further ado, I thank you very much. If you want to move up, we want this to be intimate. We want to make sure that we feel comfortable. We don't want to, well, we want to see everybody, and just when you come up with your questions, make sure you state your name and your address. We will use that format. But thank you again for coming. We're all very busy, and we really appreciate it. Okay. Thank you.
So what I'd like to do today is to start back at the beginning. So as you know, we're kind of talking about budgets and so on, and all of this follows a process. So on this timeline, we had this in August 2018, so approximately 6-7 months ago, we started this process. We're currently trying to wrap this up right here. We're a little bit behind schedule. We're probably about here. We need to finish the design development so which we can estimate it. So our next step is creating those guaranteed maximum price documents by which our construction managers will issue a guaranteed maximum price. We will enter into the GMP amendment, which will allow them to go to bid, and then we go into construction. So,
Get motions.
there we go. This all started back in September 18th with our community engagement and educational visioning session. Over 100, 120 folks attended, including the board, representatives of the board. We had a great day. It was about 8.5 hours of a session to set forth kind of the direction for the district, especially the direction for the design. So it's dividing into 3 parts. The very beginning was explaining to everybody else, because there are representatives that aren't in our buildings every single day. There were parents and politicians and students. Students were great, by the way. Explaining kind of what really works well in our buildings and what really doesn't work well in our buildings. And that was the first third of the day. The second third of the day talked about dividing it up into every single area. So first of all, looking at what's happening in schools around Northeast Ohio and beyond, and how they're dealing with problems if they're designing a new school, how they tackle those same challenges. Knowing that every school district tackles each problem different because they define their problem differently. Very unique designs for every single district. We broke that into lots of different categories. So categories on security, to technology, to core academics, to phys ed, to art, to music, to all of the different areas that we talked about. I think there were 13 different areas that everybody got a chance to provide input on. The last third of the day was actually looking at our site and going through a design exercise of pushing pieces around on the site to tackle the challenge of how would you site a building and what would be the relationships of each of those spaces to not only one another, but to the site in general. And it was a really great exercise. We produced the educational vision report, which is right here. And that's kind of set forth our thinking on kicking off design, which kicked off our engagement. Some of the priorities that were identified in this visioning session were create collaborative learning environments centered around students, provide collaboration space within each academic area, provide a maker space, provide a small group space that lead into each academic area, disperse administrative offices among academic areas, centralize student dining, provide outdoor learning space. I would add a couple. I would say that what came out of there was we wanted our building to be safe and secure, not overtly confining. I would also add that breaking down, there was a concern that, boy, we're in separate buildings right now. What happens when we put all these people together? Right? How do we break down that population and make each grade cluster a little bit more intimate? So those are the challenges by which we went into the design. So our staff engagement summary, the first round was back in November. Lots of big picture conversation and national, and our presentation of a very initial schematic design with your staff. We actually took a lot of that information and made quite a bit of changes. So on January 7th, we presented a revised schematic design based on the teacher's input from round 1. From that came a bunch of changes and so on to the schematic design, which is leading us to the design development. We engaged the first time on February 4th, and we got a little bit more detail now. So the plan is coming together. It's changed drastically from what was just estimated in schematic design because of that staff input. So the discussions were a lot more detailed. Discuss casework, equipment, more detailed items. We're not to the point of actually talking about pieces of furniture yet. Did I skip over that? Or is that going later? Okay. So as we start designing a school, we have to start somewhere. And this is part of what you're seeing the board struggle with, is our rules in Ohio, and I talked about this way before the bond issue, if you remember. Ohio does things backwards. We go get the money first and then design the building, which is crazy, because then you are adjusting your design to the changing markets and prices and all sorts of stuff. But you have to start somewhere, because we're all in Ohio. So when we started this, the number of students in the K through 5 is 1,464, and the existing square footage in all 3 of your buildings were 212,659 square feet. Sorry, 4 buildings coming separately. The enrollment projection study that came out, there's a lot of debate about the enrollment projection when it came out, was for 1,475 students that would equate to an OSFC square footage of 156,400 square feet. Knowing this, the pre-K was then added onto the building, which added 64 students. So we originally said, you know what, we're not going to design to 1475. The board said, let's design to 1500. That's a cushion. We feel safe with that. Student enrollment, we don't think it's going to decline. Let's go there to make it safe. So back when we did the bond issue, we scoped that bond issue around 1,500 students. So right now, our current design is 1,564 students, 175,000 square feet, over 20,000 square feet higher than this. This was a state-funded school. They don't fund pre-K, as well as other spaces like field houses and stuff like that. So the point of this being is that the current design is much bigger than any state-funded school you may go into now. So then we start breaking this down. And we start by breaking it down by grade levels. So as you can see up here, pre-K is really, really self-contained. So we've got a grade pre-K on current enrollment, roughly 60, projected enrollment 64. The goals are a 16-to-1 teacher-to-student ratio, which led us to design 4 classrooms for the pre-K, core classrooms. So you can follow that logic all the way down here. So kindergarten and first grade ended up being a band grade cluster, and I'll show you that in a second, but this was your current enrollment, this is the projected enrollment. Goals for kindergarten were a 21 student teacher ratio. First through third was 23-to-1, and fourth and fifth was 25-to-1. What that led to was this type of design. So in kindergarten, 11 classrooms plus 1 collaborative. First grade, 11 classrooms and 1 collaborative. And we'll show images of this after we get done. We're kind of showing how all this thought and process led up to it. Second through fifth ended up 10 classrooms and 2 collaboratives. So that's the core of academia, which accommodates 1,564 students. So then we start talking about these grade clusters. So what we talked about was pre-K doesn't collaborate as much with kindergarten as kindergarten does with first grade, given resources and teachers and so on. So what that led us to do was to set pre-K out in its own lane. In the pre-K room, along with those core classrooms, 4 core classrooms, there's all of these spaces in addition. So there's a motor space, extended learning area of 700 square feet, clinic with bathrooms for 200, psychologist's office, another office, a conference room, and material storage. Now, it's our recommendation that when you move into these buildings, that we're labeling things very specific here, but we wouldn't suggest labeling a small group room special education, right? Just label it a small group, you can use it for gifted, you can use it for tutoring, you can use it for pull-out, you can use it for student collaboration or whatnot. Students may feel a little hesitant about walking into a room where you know you're going to get help. So the K through 1 grade cluster has, in addition to all of the core classrooms and the collaborative space, you have 3 extended learning areas, a principal, an assistant principal just for K1, so 300 square feet, a conference room, a counselor, a counseling room, 2 sensory rooms, 1 per grade level, 2 teacher prep rooms, 1 per grade level, 2 material storage, 1 per grade level, special education resource room of 900 square feet, so there's another space that's a full classroom size that you may be able to use if you get a bubble class that comes through or whatnot. So that's building flexibility into the plan. And then there's 4 more spaces that are small group pull-out, 2 Title I rooms, 1 ELL, 1 SLP. So once again, don't label those, but you can use those however you would like. So the same bandwidths, 2nd and 3rd grade, 4th and 5th grade. So in addition to the 10 classrooms and the 2 collaboratives, you've got 1 principal or assistant principal's office, a conference room, 2 sensory rooms, 1 per grade. So of the sensory rooms, teacher preps, material storage, special ed resource rooms, which is a large room, and Title I, there's 1 per grade, for a total of 2 for this grade cluster. And then, of course, one of the same spaces, ELL, SLP, in the counselor's room, totaling that over there. And that follows pretty much typically for the 4th and 5th grade as well. So there's a lot of spaces in addition to just the core classrooms, and a lot of space that's built in to allow flexibility should you get a bubble class that comes through, or if your class shrinks, what do you do with that room? That's a nice problem to have. So, in addition to that, those are the spaces that are confined in the grade clusters. Outside the grade clusters, there's still academic areas that can be used. So these are some of those spaces. So we've got two MH units, 2 full-size self-contained special education units, 1 ED unit, 3 psych spaces, each of 140 square feet, 8 staff bathrooms, 1 OT-PT room, administration, beekeepers, office volunteers. There's 3 spaces for that, totaling 900 square feet. You've got 2 art rooms with 2 kilns. You've got an art storage room. Somewhere we've got another art room, but it's a digital art room. Am I correct there? Right? Yeah. Okay. So there are a total of 3 art rooms. 2 are messy spaces, and 1's designed to be more digital. So 3D printing and that type of stuff. Media center, 3,200 square feet, media workroom, media office. There's a performance platform of 1,700 square feet, so that's kind of the stage that sits outside of the cafeteria, but that can be used as a teaching space, and often is, or several. There are 2 music small group rooms, but in addition, there's 2 music rooms, general music rooms, and then 1 very large instrumental room. There's a 7,500 square foot dining space, a 30,000 square foot field house, and then 1 PE office and 1 storage room. So what I'm trying to explain here is, if you go back 2 slides, we go back to this, 3 slides, just these core academic classrooms accommodates 1,564 students. All of these spaces, and all of these spaces are in addition. So if your students are in there, the rest of the building is empty. There's no one in the music rooms, there's no one in the art rooms, there's no one in the gym, there's no one in the field houses, there's no one in the cafeteria, there's no one in the special education rooms. So what that does is it gives you flexibility. So there's a difference between how many people can the building hold, being building capacity, and design population. And we talked about this way in the beginning of planning, because we were concerned that what happens if our community grows? How do we accommodate that? And I think that, building capacity-wise, the building can hold 4,000 to 5,000 people. It's a big building. But academically, the way we plan buildings, we're planning this for 1,500, so you can do things like common planning time. So you can remove a whole grade to be able to go plan. Those rooms are all empty, but that's okay. That's how we function in personal education. Okay, so with that, we're going to take all that planning data, and Ryan's going to run through very quickly the design of the building, and we're going to recap what we kind of talked about a couple of board meetings ago. Yeah, sure.
I'm Ryan with TDA. Many of you have probably seen me in the past, so thank you for coming. I'm going to give you a brief update on the design concept. So first thing we're starting with is the site plan. And as many people are familiar, it's at the Blossom Hill site. This is Oaks Road, Bar Road, and the Valley Parkway. This is currently the developed portion of the site where there's the existing soccer field, the Oaks Road School, and some other amenities on that portion of the site. There's the water tower here and some other pieces. And this is really the portion of the site where we're talking about placing our building. The way this is going to work, the road aligns with the street across the way so that this would be a controlled intersection. Parents would utilize this side of the property to access for drop-off, pick-up, things of that nature. There's visitor parking that's close to this front portion of the building. And what this really does with this long drive and this kind of loop around, it does 2 things. First of all, it is nice for queuing. So if you have people dropping off and picking up, there's a lot of property on site where you have those cars staged so that people aren't backed up onto the roads. This is also nice in the sense that if you have somebody that's visiting the site, there's a lot of potential for people within the building to see a car or a visitor approaching the site. So it's kind of a safety, security thing as well. The back portion of the site here would be your primary bus drop-off. And what this does is the buses would come down Valley Parkway and they would access this back portion. They would stack along this end of the site and drop off students to the back of the building. This is great in the sense that you get parents dropping off on one side, buses dropping off on the other side, and there's not really that cross traffic that happens a lot of times on a lot of campuses. Really, most of your incidents that happen in parking lots are when you have buses trying to turn across, vehicular traffic on site. And this really separates those two. The other nice part about having this as your bus parking lot is that when the buses pull away, you pick up all of this space for playground throughout the day. So there'd be gates basically to control this and allow the students to utilize this whole back portion of the site for playground space. This is the building, and as Chris had mentioned, there's preschool component. There are these grade clusters. So I'll talk through that in a second. There is control area in the center, kind of our loud active spaces, and then the field house down here. And I'll start as a student approaching the building. So as I arrive in the morning as a student, I would either enter into the front doors here, if parents were dropping off, or the back doors here if I was arriving via bus. There is a controlled area in this location with administration, clinic, things of that nature. These are secure access doors, and this is how you primarily enter the building. It's a very controlled space for that. From there, you can either branch off and go to the dining areas, which are down in this location, the stage space, band rooms down in through here, kitchen areas. These are back of house spaces like storage and supply drop off and things like that. And then this is the field house component down in this area. This proximity was really important through a lot of conversations in the sense that if you have a big event going on in the field house, you'd be able to supplement that and really add to that experience by having a space like the dining area for visitors to go and kind of get away from the action a little bit while they're at an event of that ilk. So this connection really works well together. The other thing this does is we have a secure entry like I talked about. There would be the potential to close this section of the building off, all of this academic core space, and really just allow access after hours to this portion of the building. So you really have the potential to break that down and utilize this separate of this portion. As we move back up in this direction, this area in through here is our media center in the middle. It's a big, huge open media center, atrium space. Really nice big area with big learning center in this piece. This is our media-rich makerspace art room. So as you walk into the building, you see this really kind of high technology, innovative stuff happening. And that proceeds into this area with additional art rooms stacked, first floor, second floor, at this location. So you've got all of this happening in this area here in the center of the building. So it's readily accessible from all the grade levels. Down this way, we would head over to kindergarten and first grade. It was important to place them down close to all of these spaces so that they'd have quicker walk to get to dining, to get to the gym space, to get over to media, things like that, and also so that they would have easier access to recess and to buses and things of that nature. So again, this portion is kindergarten on the first floor and first grade on the second floor. These lighter beige elements that you'll see in all of these clusters are the actual traditional style classrooms. This is collaborative space and extended learning areas that happen down through this area. Down at this end of the building, we do have preschool. So there is this connection, again, age level wise, where you have preschool happening, kindergarten, and then first grade on the second floor, so that there's this connection of those kind of progression of ages as you go through this portion of the building. And I think that's important from an administrative standpoint, because you're going to have administrators in those areas that will be trying to tie and relate to all of those age groups and through that. As we move back through this portion of the building, this is our next oldest group, and this is second grade on the first floor and third grade on the second floor. As I mentioned, these are all your classroom spaces around the outside. These are collaborative areas in the center, and this is all those additional components that Chris had mentioned. These are all those additional support spaces. So small group rooms, these are areas for teachers, these are resource rooms, these are sensory rooms, all those sorts of things happen in this portion. So conceivably, any of these students has a very short walk to get to all those additional amenities that they need throughout the day. They're not traipsing across the entire building to get to certain things like that. And that basic footprint happens on both floors. So it's very familiar too. Once you've gone through a grade level, you have that experience and you know where to find things throughout the building. And then moving up this direction, up to this portion of the building, this is 4-5. So again, your oldest kids, farthest away from these portions of the building that are going to be utilized. And these spaces are set up very similar to this with only minor tweaks in some of the base programming.
Hey Ryan, can I add something on the
Yeah,
back? So go back to it. So when I talked about our kind of mission here, one of the things is to break down the population. So it's not one gigantic building with, I mean, a 3-story elementary school with 2 grades on every floor, and it's a very long distance to travel. So that's where you've got one kind of grade house, another grade house with separated pre-K, and that also works well for security reasons, works well for teacher collaboration, for a lot of things. And now you can put an administrator to each one of those grade houses, and they can operate very independently. And the nice thing that Brian did with the design is that there are stairwells at the end of each one of these grade wings so that the people upstairs can come down and get to all of these shared stuff without ever going through those other grade houses. So you'll never have first graders coming down and going through the kindergarten wing. You'll never have fourth graders or third graders, K1, 2, 3, third graders coming down and going through the second grade wing, and fifth graders coming down and going through the fourth grade wing. So you'll have that kind of security and passive way to deal with it. The other thing we try to do is, Ryan mentioned it, but there's kind of a division here. There's a division here, right? And I think the way you could look at this is that, you know, it's tough coming up with terminologies because there's all sorts of, you know, sometimes pod is a bad word in the distance. Sometimes open plan classrooms are a horrible term because we all harken back to the 70s where everything's wide open and there's no walls and no thought given to it. But in here, if you just look at the 4th and 5th grade wing, right now focusing on the 5th grade, if you draw a line down the middle, you've got one kind of learning community, so you've got 2 learning communities that make up each grade level. Then you've got a grade house, and then you've got a grade cluster, which is actually 2 of those. So it's breaking down from small. We talked in the very, very beginning about education visioning, about how there's lots of research out there saying that any student population over 150, you can't be effective in managing that population of kids, whether it's curricularly or discipline or whatever it may be. The best is somewhere in a range of about 100 to 150. So that's what this does. So it breaks down to a learning community of, so each grade level is divided into 2, but then you could also open up this movable wall and be able to use this entire collaborative space should you want to get your whole grade together to be able to address the entire grade. And then if you wanted to get more than one grade, you would use one of the shared spaces that had plenty of room to do all that out. Cool. So if you want me to do the...
Yeah.
Great.
For the little kids, like how many bathrooms are per learning community, or how hard do they have to
Yes, absolutely. So what we have,
There's no bathrooms.
there's so many bathrooms. In kindergarten and first grade, for example, each classroom has its own bathroom. As you get into these, like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, this, what you're seeing here, is a bathroom on both floors, right off the pod. So again, the idea is we don't want this kid to have to walk way over here to get to a bathroom. It's just right outside their door, essentially, to get to something.
So is that bathroom with the shared wall, with the, so the kids can kind of peek around the wall into the other gender's bathroom, or are there actual doors? Like where I teach, there's a shared wall in the primary wing where
Going into the bathroom.
Going into the bathroom, there'd be a sink here, and the girls would be on the other side. So, you know, sinks are communal for little guys, so they can peek around to the other side, to the other gender's bathroom. Is that ability still here in this design?
We have the open sinks right now. You could potentially...
And you have the open
there's
openings.
Yeah, you look at the outside of the bathroom, and there's a communal sink for boys and girls.
Right.
And then you would go into each of the bathrooms. Yeah. If you decide that you don't want that as a board, you know, tell us, we'll put doors on there, put sinks inside. Yeah.
It's a little bit of give and take. It's just teacher being able to monitor.
Sure.
Or, you know,
I just seeing that play out, the boys are going into the girls' bathroom. They're peeking around. It's a whole situation that's constant. Right. Okay, so the ability is to close that up.
So we balance. We talked about competing priorities all the way through since the beginning. It's always push and pull, right? One other thing is security. You want to be able to secure the building, but then fire wants everybody to get out very quickly. So there's always competing priorities and everything. The reason that bathrooms came about without doors and everything is that security-wise, they want to be able to monitor if there's either a problem or a discipline problem happening within those bathrooms. So, and there's no right or wrong answer.
How many stalls are in the bathroom?
Good question.
I think, and it's small, I apologize. I think we had 4 in each of these, and then, so it'd be 4 on the 2nd floor, so you'd have essentially 8 per grade level. So 4 boys and 4 girls, yeah.
Okay, because right now, when a class goes, there's 6, 3, and 3.
So it takes one time. If you go to the bathroom, it's an entire
That's 2
class.
classrooms at a time.
Sure. Sure. No, I understand.
Is there a way to put in more than that for a whole grade level?
Sure, so it's those competing priorities, right? It's space and money. So,
Are there other
Yes.
So, yeah.
So we've got another big bank of restrooms that are down in this location. And then periodically throughout the building, there are additional restrooms. So we have a lot of restrooms built in.
Did you say the second grades also have, like currently their second grades have restrooms in their classrooms? Did you say it's the opposite now?
They don't have.
They do not. Right. So that's pretty typical. If you're designing a state-funded school, they put bathrooms in the kindergarten rooms and do not put bathrooms in first through fifth. So we decided, actually, that was feedback from the teachers' meetings. We had the very first round was that first grade needed bathrooms in there. So we made that change.
That really goes to kind of the philosophy of how this came together too, because the K1 wing was set up to be a little bit more self-contained. The students would be in their rooms specifically more often than not, and that was in discussions with the kindergarten teachers and the first grade teachers. So the idea to kind of match that floor plate from first floor to second floor kind of facilitated that.
Before we leave the bathroom, Bill, is there a bathroom with the MH?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so with the MH rooms, they have self-contained bathrooms?
Yeah,
And shower.
Yep.
And shower.
And showers?
And changing table.
Just for the MH is multi-handicapped. That's what she was asking.
Okay, if you want, we'll show you the animation. I will caution you that we're technology challenged here, so it's kind of herky and
Well,
jerky.
how about this, since it's happened authentically anyways, where you are in your presentation, a little less, not as formal as a board meeting. If people have questions about the design right now, this is the opportunity maybe for them to ask them?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Fire away.
The open white spaces, the big, are those like courtyards?
These are courtyards.
Mhm.
Courtyards. And then at the end of like the multi-use area, that white block over there?
This is essentially a screened-in yard to house mechanical systems, dumpsters, things like that. So really, these are all your building support spaces, mechanicals, drop-off for kitchen, things like that. So you need a space off that, and we chose to surround that so you don't see all that.
Where's the elevator?
There is an elevator here and an elevator here.
Okay, with the field house, I saw that you had one office and one storage. My understanding is that it would be shared space with the community. Is that office then shared space between the teachers who are going to be using it to facilitate their curriculum and so on, along with community members?
No, what we have here is this one specifically right here is all the schools. So it's a little hard to see, but there is office space here, and this area in here is all your storage. This green area is the city's portion of their offices, and this block of purple right here is their storage. So both entities have their own storage, and both entities have their own office space. They have a little bigger office space, primarily because that is their base of operation for their copiers and all those sorts of things. We have some of those additional amenities throughout the rest of the building.
Can you point out the stairwells?
Yes, there are a lot of them, so bear with me. So Chris mentioned the stairwells being positioned so that you didn't have to go through a grade level. What we did is essentially each classroom cluster has 2 stairs that you can access from the outside. So this area here, there's a stair here, and there's a stair here. This one has a stair here, and then you can access this stair again right at this location. This cluster here has a stair here, and a stair here. So again, each one of those clusters has a stair at both ends of it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions about design?
Sure.
I don't know what pre-K normally or currently does, because my kids go elsewhere, but we would possibly consider switching in the future. Do they need to have access to the food or field house area? Because that's like a really long walk. Obviously, indoor active playtime for pre-K.
It is, so we played with the location of the pre-K room for a long time. There's a lot of, like you said, competing priorities, right? So part of it is they have their own playground, they have doors directly going outside, they have parents that will typically park and walk their kids into their classroom and then leave. So it's a little different than parent drop-off or bus drop-off. So because it's at the end of the building, you'll be able to do all of that. Typically pre-K kids, and every district does it differently, pre-K would be typically in their classrooms if it's a full day pre-K. If it's a half day, you might have snacks in the morning and the afternoon. So,
and as Chris mentioned, we did intentionally enlarge this area in the center here so that they could have games and stuff inside the building and not have to go anywhere. And then their playground is located right off these doors, so they don't have to go anywhere for that either. It's just right in that location. I brought this back up. This is really what Chris was mentioning about the location. By placing it here, we're able to get this separate pickup drop-off for the preschool so that you're not commingling with the base populations of the rest of the grades. That's really important because the times are different and the buses and bus drop-off for this is so critical to get them very close to the building.
For the bigger kids, where's their playground?
That is basically this whole area back here. So
this through the bus parking lot?
The bus parking lot is only utilized right at the beginning of the day when they come and at the end of the day. And then, yes, they have this whole area that's basically going to be asphalt.
There'll be gates.
Yeah.
So no vehicle can get in there while they're using this.
So all the equipment is at the elementary schools now?
So this is
the playground equipment?
The soft surface playground would be in this location. This would be all your hard surface play. So this would be...
She's asking about playground equipment. So the playground equipment, I think we're doing all new. We're not relocating.
We're bringing some over.
Bringing some over. Yeah. So the ones the stuff that we can bring over that I mentioned with PTO donate little playgrounds. So we're going to bring over as much of that as we can. So if it gets ruined taking it out, then we'll buy it new.
So to go along with that question, what about half-day kindergarten? So you said that the playgrounds would be shared with the bus parking, but there is a middle of the day bus drop-off sometime that may or may not compete with lunch hour, recess.
I think the goal is to go to all day kindergarten.
It's still a conversation that the board is having to consider doing when we move into the building to look at maybe going to all day.
Which would solve the problem.
Correct.
But at this moment, we have not, as a district, said that we're going to take the economic bite to go to full day kindergarten. And if we decide that it's not financially responsible to do such, how will we handle bus traffic for drop-off of part day?
If you're going to have special ed buses coming during the day, you're going to have all sorts of vehicles. Those will just come in the front of the building. So you're only going to have one or two at a time.
And I'm talking about, I don't know how many buses there currently, but we said all bus traffic will come off of Valley Roadway.
Right, but if you're doing half day or any special education bus or whatever can drop off in the front, there's nothing going on in the front of the school during the day. So it's not mixing with car traffic because there's just not a lot of it. What we're focused on is the beginning of school when everybody's moving on to the site and the end of school where everybody's trying to get off the site.
And currently, I think it's well over 80% of our kindergarten is all day. So there's only a really small sliver that's half day. So if that remains in place in the next few years, it would be minimal bus traffic to pick up midday.
We do have flexibility here too, in that the placement of the gate is such that you could access this road and back up this way too. So there are multiple ways to access the site and drop off and things of that nature. This plan was designed for flexibility to accommodate.
No, it's beautiful. What question is it somebody asked? Is it planned to keep this area surrounding the school mostly wooded? Yes. So that it'll be sitting
Matter of
back
fact,
in.
we're going to have to because it's all wetlands.
Yeah.
So
just to give you a frame of reference, this is about 800 feet of wooded area through here, and this is another about 300 feet in the front. So we'll have this really nice park-like feel when it's all done. Our big goal through this whole thing and working with the cooperation of the city is really to kind of preserve that as much as possible and really make this a scenic park-like setting.
And it happens to play with passive site security for schools, so it works great. And the environmental consciousness of the district.
You said that the entrance on Oaks Road, what road is that leaving? Is that currently Glenwood?
Yes.
And there will be a light there?
That is the design, yes. That is going through a city review and process.
We can draw it. But we need,
It's not your decision.
yeah. I'll do that.
Okay, thanks. Well, I could actually kind of think different questions than I do now that I've seen this. But coming in, because I've been concerned, because I've been hearing a lot of talk about only 10 classrooms. And right now, we currently have 12 or 13, I understand, at each grade level. You also talked over the presentation about 2 collaborative classrooms. So can you tell me what that is?
Sure. So let's focus on one of these grade houses. Let's focus on that one that Ryan's circling right now, which is right now the 4th grade.
Second grade.
I get them all the time. So 2nd grade. But so the dark beige is the collaborative areas. In the center of that area is a movable wall. So you pull that wall shut, and you've got a totally confined space that you could use as a dedicated classroom, or you can use it as, I mean, you've got a lot of options if you have a bubble class that comes through. You could utilize one of the special education rooms, the full-size resource rooms, as a general classroom, or you can use one of the other spaces that we've identified, or you can choose to use that collaborative space as a core classroom. And I will tell you, there are a lot of districts out here. This district chose not to do this, and that's good, that's fine. But there are a lot of districts that make that collaborative space a mandatory core classroom during the day because it forces teachers to move spaces and expose kids to different types of environments. Your district didn't do that. You said, we'd like a collaborative space, but we'd like to choose when to use it. That's why your building's a little bit bigger than a building that would be a state-funded school.
So they didn't do it, but if we have more than 10 classrooms at a grade level, you're still going to have to use that. That's the problem.
You could, but like I said, there's a lot of options on what you could do. You can handle that just through scheduling.
Okay, and my second question about it is, like with the pause in that, if there is a lot of activity in that, having talked to director of 3rd grade for almost 37 years, I can tell you have issues with noise and distractibility. I mean, if there's something going on all the time out there, is there extra soundproofing? I mean, how?
It's a great question.
How's that going to work?
Yeah, so we talked a lot in the planning process, especially back in educational visioning, about how technology, construction technology has changed so much since like the open plan classes in the 70s. Remember the divider walls that were like rippled and pulled and you could hear right through them and they just transmitted sound. Currently, the movable walls that we have specified have the same sound attenuation as a brick wall filled with ground. So that's a huge improvement over maybe what you're even experiencing today if you are experiencing movable walls. That, in my opinion, gives us the flexibility of being able to open that and close that, because being able to close that and still hearing through it isn't really closing well.
Are they made of glass, these closable walls? What are they made of?
You can surface them in different types of surfaces. Sometimes they're done in marker surface, sometimes they're done in tackable surface.
The construction is basically a metal frame that they put these veneers on the outside. So like Chris was saying, like a marker board, the inside is filled with sound insulation, basically. So these panels are basically,
Okay, so these ones with doors, with these removable walls, can you point out where the open areas are again, as opposed to the ones with the doors?
Sorry, yeah. I'm sorry.
So is there open on every floor? Is there open on every floor?
The potential to get between those two collaborative?
Yeah.
Yes, you can get between those. We have that built in now.
Okay.
We have to do that.
Okay.
They are not cheap, but they're a nice feature to have in the building.
How are those walls open and closed? Are they mechanical? Are they accordion or?
They're done by hand. They're easy to do. Basically, they're broken down into 2 panels or single panels, and anybody can push them to the side. We've done a lot of demonstrations on those in the past, and that's why they do them in a couple of panels as opposed to a big series of panels. Because if they were trying to jockey all of those down at one time,
It's the same force as shutting a slide glass door.
it is not. This is not the same as basically an accordion door, which is all one big long system. These are panels. They're wall panels.
So do the dedicated classrooms, do their doors open to this general area?
Yes.
So if a class is leaving to go to the bathroom or leaving to go to music or something, they have to walk through this area. So if there's a class going on there, that's like it would be a problem.
Right, and I still think we're thinking in the terms of teachers owning their classrooms. And that's a policy thing, and we're not designing, we always said don't design around personnel or policy. That's the wrong thing to do. But the way that these are most successful is that if you're doing an activity that's loud, it's active, it's moving around, it's working in small groups or whatever, that happens in that collaborative area. If you're doing quiet, if you're doing testing, if you're doing lecturing, if you're doing any of those kind of activities, that happens in one of those core classrooms. So if you did, for some reason, decide to put a class in that collaborative area, then you would make sure that, hey, you use this room because you're going to be quiet, and we're going to use that because we're active. That way, if you did move through that space, they're working in small groups and talking and doing things anyway.
One big difference between this, what you would have here too, and what you traditionally have in these older buildings is this building will have heat, it will have air conditioning, it will be well ventilated, all those sorts of things, and you'll have good doors on with good sound deadening properties. So you have a lot of means that if it's getting a little too noisy out here, you have the means to shut the door and basically close off from that upper area.
And I want to just point out, so where we are in this process is almost exactly where we were at North Ridgeville when we did their elementary school. And we had a bunch of teachers that were really upset with this concept. First of all, human beings don't like change, and I get it, I don't either. But you're about to embark on what they started with, professional development on how to actually use these spaces and work between those spaces. And I tell you, if you go through that school right now and talk to the curriculum director and talk to the teachers that were in there, we had one teacher that was the most outspoken, very, very outspoken, very concerned. And her exact words, because I remember to this day, were, my kids aren't guinea pigs, don't experiment on them. What we're doing works. And I get that. But if you go talk to her now, she's the first one to stand up and say, I was wrong. I just didn't understand this. It's not changing the world, it's making it better. So part of this may feel a little uncomfortable, but I think that in the next year, year and a half, 2 years, there's going to be a lot of professional development that brings you along to really understand how to use those spaces. And believe me, my mom's a first grade teacher. She'd be sitting exactly where you are going, Chris, you're wrong. Shut up.
Well, here, let's be, I just taught in one of those spaces today. And I can tell you the meltdowns happen in that pod area. Mm-hmm. The children who are in trouble go out to that pod area. The bathroom noise filters into that pod area. So the concept of the pod area and hearing it from the people who live in your buildings is worth a lot to me. I hear people don't like change. I love change. It was difficult today. So I'm trying to hear what they are having to say because these are real problems for the people who are standing on the ground. So I understand what your point is, but you don't teach in it, and we do. And so that's what I want to make sure that this point is gotten across, because that noise is awful. Sure. Children flip out every day, and that's a lost space. And now I have to walk through that all the time to take my class somewhere. That's what they're saying. This is a great idea in theory. Yes, it can work in some cases, but to dedicate this amount of space, what I'm hearing them say, for the people on the ground, they are saying, this doesn't work. So that's just what I'm hearing. Am I incorrect, educators, or? Okay. Mrs. Monteleone, did you have something to say?
Wait a minute, I want to address that. So,
okay.
So what you just said, we specifically addressed those concerns by putting a sensory room in every single grade level. Not only that, but we moved the bathrooms from this feedback to outside of the pods. You have to leave the door, go outside the pod to use the bathroom so you're not exposed to the smells and noise and stuff that happens in bathrooms.
So, just can I ask a question about the pod for just a second?
Sure.
So this area that could become a classroom, is that part of the number? When you said that there were 11 rooms per grade, are those two areas with a division part of it? Okay. I just want to be clear on when do those become potentially a dedicated classroom space?
That's a policy thing. You can choose to do that or not to do that.
In terms of number, though, the 11 to 1 doesn't have anything to do with that. Okay. And if it did become a space and walls get closed, are there any windows?
Yes. There's one. Now, admittedly, it's between all the classrooms, so there's not a lot of window space, but that's what happens when you
block it off, you block it off.
Well, no, it's what happens when you surround the classrooms. So, and you want access immediately from the classrooms. So, If you choose not to use that as a classroom, don't use it as a classroom. That's what I mean by this being flexible. When the number one thing that came out of the educational visionary session was to create places for students to collaborate within their grade wings. That's what this is a direct answer to.
Okay, and if I can ask, when it comes to having a resource room for the students, okay, we typically have the need for a resource room at grade level. Where are those resource rooms located in proximity to their gen ed peers?
Right there, in the bottom.
Is that room comparable to the other rooms?
Yes.
Okay, size-wise and so on?
Yes. And on top of that, there's several small group pull-out rooms for whatever you'd like to use it for.
Okay, and where do those rooms come in? Are they part of the green that's at the bottom?
No, they're in all of these central portions. So in all these center portions of the clusters, they end up in these areas.
Okay, and at no time are those rooms becoming, quote, gen ed rooms. They're not part of, because I've heard you say those could be turned into a classroom if you need it. But really, you know, as teachers, we just want to make sure the community hears that we're very sensitive about the needs of the special ed community, that the building is being designed with dedicated space to their needs, and that those spaces are meeting what law requires, that they are supposed to be comparable spaces. We're not going to be pulling kids into a hallway area for services. That is not our intention.
Correct.
Okay, so those are dedicated.
Yeah, what my point was if we label that room small group room, it's a policy on what you use that room for. If you use it, if you say, listen, this is only Title I.
Okay, I want to be careful that it doesn't become, these are rooms we could use for X number of functions, and because all those functions have to be met, we wind up corralling people elsewhere. I understand you don't want to call it this room or that, but we really do need dedicated space to the students. And then we need dedicated space because we run IEP meetings. We have conferences that happen in the building, and I'm hearing some of those dedicated spaces. But we have to make sure that we're not putting 7 different things into one space.
Okay, so here it is. So you can feedback on this right now. So we've got in the 4th and 5th grade space, and it's the same as the 2nd and 3rd. We've got one principal and assistant principal's office.
Okay, does that office contain, and I apologize for interrupting, but that contains also the secretary and equipment. So when that space of the 300, what goes into the principal, assistant principal office?
It's 2 offices. It's the assistant principal and the principal have an office. So there's a waiting space and all their amenities, and then
Do they have support staff access right there?
There's a space for one, yes.
Okay.
So
That was me. I just want to be clear.
there's a conference room of 250 square feet, 240 square feet. Once again, you can use that for administrative purposes, use it for special ed, for anything. 2 sensory rooms, 2 teacher prep rooms, 2 material storage rooms, 2 special ed resource rooms, 2 Title I rooms, 1 ELL room, 1 SLP room, 1 counselor's room, and 1 gifted room. Now, if policy changes, Title I goes away, it's still a room.
Okay, the gifted, we have one room servicing both 4th and 5th grade.
Correct.
Okay.
720 square feet.
How's that work in our policy? Is that because we're pulling kids out or?
So we've changed our gifted model of service. So we pull kids together, so any child that are, identified in math, let's say, they get pulled together at central school every day for math taught, and then they go back into their general classroom. We do the same thing for ELL. So a kid, if they're identified in both, will get pulled twice. So the room is dedicated for gifted services to provide those services in that same model when we move to this new school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Bernauer, you were on the education efficacy group. Were you in that group?
Right.
Okay.
That was actually before the...
So I want to ask you, the flexible space that came out of that, what was the nature of that discussion with wanting flexible spaces?
Oh, the teachers did, on that committee, it was mostly the teachers, I think, that did ask that there be like a larger space available so that, when they had like grandparents' day or, when they had a speaker in for grade level or something, that they would have at least a space in this building. And my concern when I came here tonight was that now it sounded more like it really is glad to hear you say that it's not the 70s style for that building. Because that was really what they were asking for at that point in the process.
So like a shared space on each wing?
There would be a shared space, yeah, just that people
Okay.
in this building could go.
Okay.
I'm not even sure that it was for everybody.
Okay.
It was just, it would be place. Because currently in this, there's really no place because the gymnasium is the cafeteria and, you know, everything.
So it sounds like that this school is going to be a similar transition as corporate America has gone to. So corporate America has gone from everybody has an office, everybody has a hallway, to collaborative spacing, correct? So more teamwork space, lower slung cubicles instead of everybody having a high wall cubicle, and huddle rooms and the such, right?
Kind of. I mean, the difference between that is I would liken corporate America to the open plan classroom of the 70s.
Yeah.
Because they did architecture that forced you to do things one way. What we're trying to do here is create flexibility where you can be collaborative, or you can shut your doors and teach exactly the way you design. So we're trying to create that flexibility that allows you to do that. And we're doing that by not putting very many movable walls between classrooms. We're being very selective on where those are done so that not everybody has that and one breaks and you don't get to use it, it doesn't get repaired, whatever the case may be. So, so we're trying to do this in such a way that's as flexible as possible.
Where are the huddle room? I'm not from corporate America, so what is that?
So a huddle room is what you would have a small meeting room. So in corporate America, if it's a cubicle environment, you don't have any privacy. You have a meeting, you can disturb others. So these huddle rooms may be a breakout for 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 people. What you would call a conference room in a certain world. And I would agree with you that a part of corporate America have gone through that, but now they've progressed further. And it's been a transition. Some of it's worked better than others. Some of it is still in process. But to Kathy's point, there are still some things that don't work out. For instance, when you walk through some of the most modern ones who've gone through the 2010 planning, there's still a noise transference problem. And you'll see a lot of people working at desks with headphones, music, etc., because of the distraction. And it's changed the workforce. And the workforce has adapted. The teachers and the students will have to figure out kind of how it adapts, because it is interesting at least how that piece works.
Absolutely.
And I have one more question. What is the census of the current census? You had it up there of grade, like 230 students, 240 students per grade.
Yeah, I mean, it varies depending on the grade level.
But on average,
they're all under 300 right now, currently in K to 5. So if I look at my current second grade numbers right now, so they would be the 5th grade class when that building opens. Okay, so current second grade class, we have 237 students. So there would be 237 5th graders if our enrollment stays exactly what it is today.
and so there is 10 classrooms, and if we held on plan, or worst case, we can go back to the 1960s or 70s and we could go up to 30 students, and that would give us a 300 students per class. I'm not saying it's optimal, but that's kind of where you would max out. I don't know what the maximum student density would be.
Well, a couple of things, you know, from an enrollment standpoint, the high watermark in the district was, I think it was about 4,800. And that was maybe about 12 years ago, 15 years ago. So we've had a slow decline. Most districts have had a declining enrollment, you know, over the last 15 years. So we're at about 37, 38.
37.
About 37, 3,800. And the enrollment studies, we had multiple enrollment studies done over the last, 5 or 6 years. All of them predicted continual decline. Slow, but
right. We talked
trending
about
down.
this in the strategic planning. The one thing that I understand that these surveys didn't take into account was 2 cities building brand new field houses and the district building a state-of-the-art elementary school, which has the potential to flip this piece, because now we're going from, I'm going to say this, probably the most antiquated elementary schools in this area to the most modern, with modern field houses, with modern amenities, which we don't really have. So none of those surveys, from what I understood, took into account that we may have a population flip because of our aging Brecksville community and the ability for young families to move into the district. So it's just, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, no, and you're right. And we weren't, the board, when the board had these enrollment studies done, we weren't like, you know, we understood that's a study, right? It's like a 10-day forecast. How much, you know, how much reliance you're going to have on day 10, right? I mean, it's Cleveland. The same kind of thing, right? You can have something happen where you don't know, you got a new school, you got a new field house, you may have, you know, more families moving into the area.
The nice thing is we do have options, right? And
well, I would, to add on to that, what I was going to say though is that, you know, our middle school and our high school have excess capacity. Right. Okay, so this is starting out online as pre-K through 5, right? Take a look at our buildings today, right? You know, when we've had enrollment shifts, we've moved to where the capacity in the building was. So, you know, it doesn't preclude us from someday moving 5th grade up if you all of a sudden get this explosion and there's not enough space there. But, you know, because that type of enrollment, you know, enrollment numbers are choppy. They don't, if it goes up 10%, it doesn't mean every grade goes up 10%, right? You'll start to see it on the front end in kindergarten, 1st grade, right? You'll start to see those numbers usually go higher there. So you can kind of predict for it and see it kind of move through. So, you know, there's capacity in the building so that, you know, even with this, if we do get an explosion, you know, there's capacity in the other buildings to accommodate if needed.
That's the point, but I think the thing I wanted to bring up was, we talk about this, and it does have a finite ability, and we talked about, oh, well, our enrollment is projected to go down or hold. Bringing up the fact that we do have extra capacity in the middle school and the high school, I just wanted the community to know that, right? So we can do what we did this year, when we can take 5th grade and move it to Central, or move Central to the middle school, and we're fine, and that gives us an extra 10 classrooms.
Right. It's a fluid situation. We're making a decision. The building's not going to come on for 2.5 more years, but you got to decide how big you're going to make it, right? And so then things can happen, and people could, you know, if you build it too big, then people complain, well, you got all these empty classrooms. Why'd you, right? You're trying to strike a balance, which I think.
No, I think it's well sized. I don't want anybody to think.
And we have land, so we have the ability to expand. I mean, this is on a nice plot of land. It's not landlocked like we were at Central, so there's an ability to grow if that's what happens.
Is there room in that design? That's what I was going to ask. As the only preschool building in the district, is there room as you're making this design that you can say, you know what, if in 20 years down the road, we're still going to have this building, this would be the area we could add on to. Is that being looked at now?
Absolutely. We had that discussion at the board meeting when we're looking at the base of the whole building. Is that correct? And that was what we wanted to see.
I would also just add on to the planning discussion. I give your board a lot of credit. Most boards do one enrollment projection and say, okay, that's it, let's go. And they did several enrollment projections just to take the average of all of these and make sure that they were planning correctly. So a lot of diligence. Yeah.
In terms of, like right now, my son's in 2nd grade, and he goes into the same classroom every morning. With all this flexibility, will they still have like a dedicated classroom where they won't go for the most part, let's say specials, or if they're just going to flow depending on the week or whatever?
Really a policy thing?
Yeah, we plan on kids still having a homeroom to go to. Now, within that grade level, if teachers decide that they want to team teach and one teaches math and science and the other one, you know, they may have more than one teacher of record, but the intent would be that every student, when they come into the building, will go to a place and have a homeroom.
Could I see that gifted, where the gifted class, I didn't see that noted in your plan. And there's one per pod, or
one per grade, so 2 per.
It's in the 4th and 5th.
Right there. So there's one there, and then there's one.
So in the 5th grade pod, let's say, I teach the 5th grade gift. I'm just curious, where might that be? Can you show me again? I'm just trying to, sorry.
It's right here.
Right there.
Yeah. So basically, again, it's central. The idea was that it would be off this secondary hallway, so that if you had students coming from other places in the building, they would have access to that.
So it'd be shared between grade levels?
Yes. And again, if that's a room that's not being used at a portion during the day, you could utilize that for other things and not disrupt the classes that are doing.
I have two questions. Before the battery died, Mrs. Mack had asked you to point out like where the closed rooms are and where the open areas are. I was curious in regards to the kindergarten and first grade wings. You had mentioned how that fifth grade wing has, and the second grade wing has that door. I'm looking at the kindergarten and first grade wings. Do they have, like, if that needs to become a classroom, is that also have a door to close that off?
This is the potential, the way this is laid out, that could be a classroom. That could conceivably be closed
So
off.
currently there aren't doors configured there, but if it needs to be, there's something that could be, the district would be able to do that.
This one was envisioned as an open space that people could kind of flow to. This could be your kind of active area. They could go there and do tasks, things of that nature, maybe some breakout space. Maybe they have a display that they set up and all the students are going to see it. If there was that overflow, if it just reached a point where you needed to close it off, there is the potential. It has its own bathroom. So it's set up for that, and we still have maintained these extended learning areas that are here. So again, 4 classrooms in each of these areas basically spill out into these extended learning areas. So they could get small groups together out there. They could have a kind of couple class discussion, things like that out there.
In those open areas, is there a place for storage, like in the window seats possibly? Because I know that sometimes, but the window seats in some of the buildings don't have storage under them, so.
We're way far away from picking up furniture, you know?
Well, it's not furniture, it's actually a built-in, those window are, yeah.
So, like casework and that kind of stuff. So we pulled some images of all those kind of stores that happens in class, possibilities. So even with furniture and different types of mobile storage, we can talk about. And then if you go back to the images of the classrooms, you know, there's a lot of casework built in.
Well, that's the classrooms, but what about the open pods? Because you have a bathroom, but they're pretty hollowed out areas. So do you have storage built in, or those are going to have to be put in portably for a kindergarten if it's an overflow situation?
So this is one of the collaborative spaces. There's obviously the cubbies that would go into one of these areas. There is a built-in piece of casework above. We have these little areas that are hard to see in these plans. I apologize for that. But basically, those areas that go out to the windows would have that kind of built-in.
Can you go back to that picture so
Yeah, I'll show
you could click on it?
So like in these areas, the idea was that you could have traveling library books.
Okay.
So again, you could wheel some library books
Sure.
down in this location that were specific to kind of course actions. And then there would be built-ins in these kind of areas so that you could do some storage here and then some storage in this component here. So there is storage in those spaces.
Okay, because the concern is, you know, as a person teaching in that area, if she's teaching in gifted, you know, she needs a place to keep her things, her materials. That's a lot of materials, especially if she's teaching a large amount. So that in that collaborative area, our educators will have a place dedicated for them to store things. Is that correct? They're not have to always be on a cart.
That's 100%
Okay.
accurate. And then we also have teacher workrooms, and teacher storage space in that workroom area.
Okay.
So there's additional spaces for all those things. So if everybody doesn't have to have a big ream of red construction paper in their room, you could go to that space and get what you need. You could consolidate some of those things if you wanted to, or you could store it in your room. There's the potential for both of those to happen.
So do you have dedicated copy rooms as well in each pod area? Okay.
Per grade level.
Per grade.
Transitioning between the schools right now, the kids in the elementaries, you don't have a designated classroom. When they go to Central, currently ending this year, the kids tend to flip between a couple of teachers and they may be pulled out if they're in a special group or whatever. When they go from just that little flipping to then the middle school, will they be running the length of the building just to make their classes? I guess I'm concerned with the fifth graders, if they're mostly in their pod all day, that's really going to hinder them when they then move to the middle school and have to run the length of the building by the time of the bell.
So there's two schools of thought there. The one school would be, let's design this as poorly as the middle school. So no, I think that the concept of middle school teaming is really where this whole concept started. The success of middle school teaming, 4 or 5 teachers having 100 students and being able to work with them and develop them is pushing into the lower grades of lower grades of the high school and upper grades of the elementary population, not into the primary portions of the elementary, but into those, it's stretching beyond middle school nationwide. So it's due to the success of teaming. So, you know, the question is, how do you prepare kids to be able to get to where they need to be? Strategically, they're in the farthest place in the building to get the lunch, and it's done on purpose a little bit. It's to make you accountable for your time and start to teach that before they get to the middle school. So we did put the 5th graders right next to the lunchroom with the younger kids and stuff like that. All the way back.
I have a question about safety and security. So with the classrooms and the spaces, with the glass that's going in, the windows that we have, what kind of glass is going in? Is it impact resistant? Second, do the windows open? If I'm in the classroom, do I have the ability to open a window? I'm also getting questions from teachers about if there's a fire in the building and I've got 1st grade on the 2nd floor, how quickly are we going to be able to get them to either stairwell and get them safely out of the building? And has this been looked at in conjunction with the recommendations from the community committee that was working on safety and security for safety door latches and things? We don't want our school to feel like a prison in any way, shape, or form, but we really struggle to make sure that our doors can properly latch and lock from the inside and all those things. Can you speak to the safety and security measures? Because I have people that are saying, if I happen to be in these open pod areas or these open areas, what are we doing that's better than what we already did?
So we presented in the executive session last week to discuss safety and security. So I can't go into real specifics in a general meeting like this. What I can tell you is that we've met with Rexville City and Broadview Heights City Police and Fire. And those are oftentimes, I talked about it earlier, they're kind of opposing thoughts, right? They have all approved our plan. You'll have the ability to lock down sections of the building, individual spaces, or larger sections of the building, or the entire building. So you'll have that flexibility, so we're not locking into anything. There'll be state-of-the-art communications between spaces. Other than that, I don't want to go into too much specifics.
But can you tell me, if I have a classroom, can I open my windows?
Yeah, you can, but here's my view on this. It's not going to open so that you can step out of the window. But we can supply you with a window break, because if something that drastic is going on in your school, break the window and get out.
But how do you know where that fine line is between me breaking the glass and me protecting my students?
You know the fine lines before to run or to hunker down. It's a lot of self-reflection and it's training.
And I understand that. I mean, I'm a classroom teacher of kindergarten for 24 years, and I have a police officer husband. So when you're looking at both scenarios, in the city of Cleveland, so we're looking at a scenario in which you have to be split-second decisions. And my #1 priority is keeping my students safe. Absolutely, that is my #1 priority. My second is teaching them, quite frankly. Because at the end of the day, I want that baby going home. That being said, in that split-second decision, right now, I can make a split-second decision that will not traumatize my children to the degree of me taking out a hammer and breaking a window in front of them to find out that it wasn't a true emergency. Right now, I can open my windows and toss my darlings out, and I can say, we're running outside, go to recess right now, for all that they know. And I can do that and know that they are safe, that I haven't jeopardized anything, and I haven't cost the district a ton of money or the community payers a ton of money. So that I have a huge problem with. My safety and security, that's being my #1. I'll work with flexible classrooms, and I'm excited as all get up to have air conditioning. But at the end of the day, like that safety is just too much for me too.
Sure. So I understand that, and I appreciate that. I know that we talked a lot about safety and security in our educational vision session, and all the way through, we've done a lot of work with safety and security. I sat on the board that reviewed the safety and security protocols after the Success Tech shooting. So, and we designed 28 brand new buildings in Cleveland. So we get that. I can tell you that for a variety of reasons at the police department's level, Having operable windows that open to be able to get a child out is not their first preference. And I don't know if I can put more specifics in there.
If you work in a building that can lose power, having the ability to also open that window when the air conditioning isn't running.
You can open
Our high
windows,
school,
yeah.
okay, so that was the question, in this new building, would I have the ability to open windows? Because optimally,
The answer
so
is
I
yes.
can't, I wouldn't be able to shimmy out of that opening. So it's a very small opening.
Well, if you go to any schools, it's the hopper style window. So it's a hopper style window that opens like this or like this, that allows airflow in and out, but it doesn't allow someone to come in or someone to exit.
That's really the reason for it. They put a restrictor on it so that somebody couldn't crawl back through your window. If you left it open, you wouldn't have somebody sneaking in.
Well, isn't there a permanent screen there? It's not like open.
There's not an inside screen.
So when I turn the turnkey, there's like a permanent screen, or it's open. It's an opening. Okay, and are the blinds in between the windows as well, the same style? So it shades?
We currently do, but we can talk about shades. It's one of those VE items, so it's a very expensive thing to do, but it's what we do in all the state schools. But she's talking about the blinds in between two panes of glass. So they're very expensive windows, so we're considering that option versus shades. So
Well, as somebody who works with the blinds, it's great until they break, and then you have to take your two panes apart to do that. So I can understand, as long as you have the ability to have something that will darken the room.
Correct.
A new building, it won't break for a long time.
She's heard that story before. Okay.
As Michelle was saying, we just had Alice training, and I told my third grade class all the time, there's a problem, here's the window to open, you run as fast as you can out there. We talk about this all the time. And with that, I am very concerned. I feel locked in. And if you're not going to have that first floor open that kids can get out, then are there several windows along in different rooms that can be? Because I look at evacuation, and you've got kids everywhere able to get out. And I look at this, and I look at just lined up and having problems in a very long time trying to get out of the building in emergency.
it comes into the details, but there are doors going directly outside every single one of the rooms. On the second floor, you're very, very, very close to a stair that also goes directly outside.
That's one thing I wanted to point out too, is as we were talking about these grade levels, each one of these academic communities has two separate exits out of each of these components. So really you have multiple ways to get out of that, and then there are the two stairs at each of those ends. So you're not, for example, if there was something bad here, you have multiple ways to get through that space and get out.
So get outside or just out of that space?
Get outside.
So they go straight outside these doors to the outside?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't.
Where are the doors on the first level that go away from the active spaces outside? Are they within the active space?
See the dark beige?
Yeah.
So on the first floor, this dark beige right here, you've got doors right here that go out into the hallway, but you've got doors right here that go outside. Okay. Doors right here that go into the hallway, you've got doors right here that go directly outside.
So all three of those areas would go.
So there's multiple ways to get to everywhere, so you're not going to feel locked in. It's the ability to get multiple places.
We have security on the building that if somebody were to prop open a door or something, it would signal to let us know that something is.
Door alarms,
yeah.
Yep.
Will we have the ability in a classroom? Right now, some of the elementaries still have the ability to do a quick call into an office. It doesn't go into somebody's voicemail, it doesn't ring. But they have that emergency call. So you don't want to freak out the rest of the kids in the room, but you really need someone now. And so is that going to be part of it?
Phones in every classroom, in every space.
Okay, good.
Two-way communications directly to the office. Everything.
But it's not calling to call the secretary.
You call whoever you'd like.
They're saying, do you have an emergency button you can get?
It's a PA. It's not a phone line. Yes.
So typically there is one that's on the phone. So you have to remember these are voice over IP phones, so they're almost like little computers. So So there's one button you can hit very quickly, that's a panic alarm, or one that goes directly to the police station, the other goes directly to the office.
And if it goes directly to the office, is it going to go to then calling out like a speaker? Or is it going to a person to ring that then rolls into their voicemail? That's a tech issue.
It is, but we're not there yet. There will be the capability of doing that and an immediate alert from every space in that building to get to somebody. So I know, we've heard you and said that that's really important to be able to do that, but we're just not there in the design to tell you the features of what that system will look like, other than, yes, you will have the capability to do that. How and what that looks like, not there yet.
So I'll also tell you that, like I said, those telephones are like little computers. You can make them do anything. You also have, when you scan somebody in, you can choose to use, what's it called with the license?
Yeah. The visitor badging system.
Yeah. So you give somebody your license. A lot of schools have these now, right? So, and I know this because I got flagged. You go in and they put your license in, and it pops up that either A, this person's fine, or B, there's several people that match that description that, there could be a problem. And you either dismiss those or accept those. Well, my name's Chris Smith. You know me, Chris Smith? There's a lot of Chris Smiths running around doing bad things too. So there's a security, and one of the secretaries said, there's one good Chris Smith, and for me, there's a bunch of bad ones that red comes up. She accidentally hit the wrong button and hit red. Well, I was standing next to the principal, he got a text right away, a police car pulled up. I mean, it was immediate. So there's a lot of technology can work with our security as well. And I think I mentioned before, there's going to be over 200 cameras in the building.
And how long were you in jail?
Well, I wasn't quite cleared out pretty quickly.
Along those lines, is there a backup generator or something like those?
There is.
Yes.
Okay. So all of the safety and security phones and everything are on the emergency generator.
HVAC?
For a certain amount of time. So emergency generators are sized to how long do you want those things to run. So they'll run for a very short amount of time and then shut down. Yep.
How many students do you think will be in the lunchroom at a time? What are you looking at for capacity for that?
So it's sized larger than, typically you would size these for a third of the student population, thinking that there's going to be 3 lunches. This one's sized a little bit different than that. So it gives you the flexibility of using different types of furniture, not everything that's in cafeteria furniture. So we have envisioned before we go to policy, you could actually fit half the student population. You could go to 2 lunches if you wanted to. But 3 lunches is what we typically do.
No, but I guess I see that hybrid problem for employees as well as an unstructured activity and the way it's being supervised now, that's probably going to need to change or that needs to be considered.
Yeah, our lunch staff would absolutely have our head if we went to 2 lunches and put 600 kids in the. No, we're not doing that. So. Yes, that's part of programming. I mean, we're envisioning having more than that in terms of lunch periods, and it is. We have people that come in and monitor lunch now, so just envision all of those people still being in that area. There's also some creative things that we've done with scheduling before, so if a grade level's at lunch, maybe half of them eat first and half go out for recess, and then they flip in the same, and so there's multiple ways through programming and scheduling that we can handle that lunch.
And remember, you've got the world's greatest indoor recess facility that any elementary school can have. No one's got that kind of space.
I'm just worried about all of the little kids, so many of them in one space.
The nice thing, design-wise, is we designed it to be a very big space. You can always have 4, 5, 6 lunches.
Can you partition it? Is there a way to?
You could. We haven't designed that yet, but I think we can talk about it.
The interesting thing is I graduated with 600 kids in my class, and we had 4 elementary schools, and we ate lunch as a class. So we actually ate lunch in the cafeteria with 150 students, all at one time. So, like when I went to school, the size of the school that I actually went to, it's interesting to hear the discussion, because for me it's normal. And we went straight from a 4th grade setting where we had a single classroom with the teacher switch to the 5th grade setting where we had 4 teachers, common hallways, upstairs, downstairs, and a transition with large classes into work. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Okay, 2 things. One, the lunch area have considered noise abatement, because if you go into any of the cafeterias, it's not good for their hearing?
Yeah, so we actually hire an acoustician who actually acoustically models each one of those spaces. So especially the music rooms, the performing spaces, and then the cafeteria for sure. So when you go into the cafeteria, you're going to see these like colored panels on the wall, which are all sound attenuators.
Okay, my other question is how big is the clinic? Since this is going to take care of 6th grade levels, how big is the clinic? Because it has to be bigger than what's at the high school, even though the student population is about the same, but the clinic visits are far greater for the little kids than it is for the big ones.
Second question, how many beds?
We got four beds, and then we've got actually a secondary. We've got a secondary clinic on the second floor up at this location. So then if you have kids up in this area that maybe just need to go get out and sit down for a little bit, you have the potential to do that. And then there's also an additional clinic in the preschool space for our kids.
And is that staffed by health services or staffed by office personnel?
It would be staffed by our nurses.
So there'll be somebody upstairs and maybe somebody might stop in clinic?
Yeah, the idea was kind of like a minute clinic thing. So if you have kids in the 4th and 5th grade wing or on that side of the building that might have a stomach ache, and just instead of coming all the way down to the other end of the building, because don't forget, this is a 150,000 square foot building, so it's a little bit of a walk if you're not feeling well. The thought was to put something on the opposite end of the building so that there is a little clinic there for kids on that side of the building, so we're not having sick kids walk through the building.
4 beds may not be large enough though if you have to have holding space for kids that are going home that are growing up or whatever.
Sure, and where the clinic is placed, it's right off the main vestibule. That was a purposeful placement on that because the parents can come into the secure vestibule, go right into clinic, pick up their kids, and come right back out without having to come through the building. So it was, we thought about that placement of being there, and so while it's on the one end of the building, we didn't want to leave, the full other side of the building to be isolated from medical care if they needed it. So. But there was a purposeful design for that so that when a parent is coming, they can come right in, pick up their child, and go right back out and not have to stand and wait. We'd have the child there.
Okay, I have two, maybe they'll sound like crazy questions to you, but just want to be sure. Are we going to keep books in the media center?
Nope.
Of course.
I think
We don't have a hearing or this is a library.
Yeah, right.
This used to be a library.
And the other question I have is about the art rooms. Okay, like right now we have 4. You said there are going to be 2 art rooms, and then you said, and there will be a digital art room. That sounds like an oxymoron to somebody that taught K through 3. Can you explain what that is?
Sure.
I have no idea.
Yeah, so there are technically 3 art rooms. The intent was designed 2 as messy spaces and 1 as a clean art space. So
There's no such thing as a clean art space. K3 building, I'm just telling you.
sure. So art comes in many forms, as you know. But
Okay.
part of this is it was asked to make kind of making spaces, and making can happen in a lot of different ways. Making can happen through painting and drawing and sculpting and clay making and all sorts of pottery and all sorts of stuff. It can also happen digitally. So preparing kids for digital art was one of the initiatives. So there's one room that's set up for that. Now you can do anything. Once again, it's a room. So if the direction from the district is we want 3 messy spaces, then we can make it a messy space.
Oh, okay. Okay, so they can still do that.
Does it have a kiln? Does it have storage?
There are 2 kilns and messy rooms.
The clean room?
The clean room is not a kiln. All 3 rooms have storage.
Sinks in the clean room?
Oh, sinks in the digital room?
I think there's. I don't recall.
We can't remember. But I know that there are sinks in of course, in the messy room.
Right.
Hot water?
Yes,
We do have one.
Yeah, no, okay, yeah, no, I get it, where you're coming from. So, yes, just to clarify, all of the classrooms will have hot and cold water.
So the digital room doesn't have sinks?
It does. I was mistaken.
It does?
There will.
Is there a space where the teachers can go and eat their lunch and be able to mix with people who might not be part of their grade level or house or whatever,
So there is not a central staff lunchroom, but there are staff workrooms in every single one of those spaces. So there are teacher workrooms. Basically, if you want
So how big is the teacher's workroom then that's within the space? I mean,
It's basically big enough so that you can have a table in it, so you can sit all the teachers from that grade level in that area.
How big a table are we talking? Are we talking 6 people, 10 people?
Let me explain. So typically there is a teacher has a dedicated workstation. So that can hold a computer, it's got lockable storage, you put your personal wardrobe, stuff like that in those spaces. And there's one chair per teacher. There's a big table in the center, and you can take that chair and scoot it around, and 4 or 5 of you can collaborate around that table, or all of you can, or it's a very flexible space. And the reason that it's in that space is it's also, researchers show us that it's very important for students to be able to see you collaborate. You see work.
And respectfully, what I've heard from my pre-K 5 teachers is that they really would like a chance to not be in the presence of the kids and be able to have that 40 minutes or half hour after they get their stuff and be able to be with each other. We're going to put people into a building and have not worked together before. And I just want to make the connection. We at the high school, we don't use our space. And we don't use it because it's so far away. We don't use it because of the style in which we work. However, I know the elementaries use theirs. And to back it up, the PSOs have repeatedly improved those spaces for them because and there used to be this thing about the teacher's lounge and it was a negative, but I've actually been in there where that's where teachers go, they share, they get to know each other, they support each other. It's not just the idea of, just lunchroom. And so I don't know.
Sure, good question. So the way we deal with that is that when you're not with your students, your students are elsewhere, right? So they're either at lunch, or they're at art or music, or somewhere else. Well, in that case, that's why that space is there, because you don't have students in that space. So you can use any of those.
If we want to have a large group of teachers, and it's going to feel funny if I'm walking into someone else's space and I need to borrow their chair. I mean, if we're
Bonnie, let me try to answer that for you. So we had, again, those competing priorities. When we went and we talked to all the teachers, we had teachers ask about a lunchroom, and then we had other teachers who spoke up right behind and said, no, I don't need a lunchroom, I will never use it. So the majority of the teachers, when we engaged them, said there were a few teachers said, no, I absolutely want a teacher's lunchroom. But the majority of the teachers said, no, if we have this collaborative space, which now does not have workstations in it because the feedback we got from the teachers was we want the workstations in their room. So now it's this dedicated teacher room that has a giant table for 12. So if there's 10 or 12 people, 15 people, whatever, working in that pod, they can sit together at that table, have their lunch. There'll be refrigerators, there's copy, there's storage. So that was feedback that was designed purposefully the way it was based on that feedback that we got from teachers. I agree. There were a few teachers that said, we want a staff lunchroom. Most of the teachers said no, they would want to eat with their staff. It comes down to programming again. We envision programming looking that an entire grade level will do something all at the same time. So even the concern about walking through the collaborative spaces, you guys are all going to be leaving at the same time to go somewhere, to do something. We envision that group having lunch together. So you will all be together in that time where you're not going to have kids. So those spaces are flexible enough, but it's more of the programming and the scheduling behind how those spaces are used that some of your questions are coming from.
So in that space then, it isn't really necessarily my primary work area. I could be working in the classroom and so on. So, and I just heard you say it would be set up to where we could have coffee and a small fridge in there and so on. So it does function like a mini lounge.
Correct, but it's also collaboration.
Okay, so people will still have coffee, people will still have...
But is that in each pod? Is that what you're saying?
You have in each grade level. So every grade level has that space dedicated to the teachers in that grade level.
Is the wall going to be made of glass to the teacher's lounge? Because that's like an aquarium, because the kids do walk by, and you have to cover it up. So that's
these aren't going to have glass.
They are not glass.
So there's not a time that I'm always with my third grade team. I never see first grade teachers or fifth grade teachers. I'm surprised at what you're saying. I wasn't on the teams that did this, but I know at Hilton that's been a very big concern because we use our lounge all the time, and it's a time of celebration for us. It's a time of birthdays and graduations, and it's really our time to work with our family. We look at our building as our family, and the teachers are very, very concerned that they're going to lose that. And they're only going to be with their grade levels, which they're going to get a lot of new people, which is great, but then feel like they're not a part of the building sneaking into first grade or sneaking into fifth grade. So it is something that at least I know Hilton has been expressing over and over, that is something that if there is a way that can be maneuvered, it would be something that staff would really like. Whether or not they said it in the past, I don't know.
And to augment Karen and the gentleman in front, I'm sorry, I have to know his name. Like when he talked, Mike Michelle, huddle spaces, like, you know, like we've referenced the Board of Ed, and thank you so much, Board of Ed, by the way, for hosting this for us so that we have this for the community and the teachers and the board, and thank you, architects, for coming as well. But like, to kind of bounce off, like I heard, we started this conversation earlier with Mike sharing like this whole business, you know, world and how they went to this, and you look at Google and you look at these, like they have bean bags for their employees and they have like all of this kind of stuff, and it's kind of neat because to me it's like an elementary building in some of these executive, you know, places. And then, you know, then we're going back to the idea that, you know, we want to collaborate and we want this innovative spaces being utilized, and we want to, you know, and I've done this lots. I've done cross-grade level projects, and we use the space we already have. But I feel like I'm being like, and I'm literally sitting between these two, because I feel like that's contradictory to both of these avenues by not having a large space for the adults. Like, where am I going to be provided that opportunity and to build that vertical alignment, to do those cross-grade levels, to build those relationships with other teachers and other grades so that we can move forward, to build that community, because as like, not only the community of Breast Guys, but I think that that's one of the things that if you talk about our community members and they talk about their elementary schools, that's one of the first things that you'll hear them say is, my elementary school is like a community. Like, my teachers all know each other. You walk in the building, like, I know so many, I mean, on this board, we're looking at 2 of these parents' kids. You know, like, you get to know everybody, and it makes me very nervous when you're going to a building this large, that now you're shuffling the professional people off into these tiny little workrooms. And in the business world, you would never see that happening. If anything, they're glorified cafeterias, and they have catered lunches, and they have, and now here I am, like, you know, don't put baby in a corner. You know, like,
no, Michelle, thank you. Michelle, thank you.
Really, I don't know.
No, thank you for sharing, because I am in a building that they designed that has this. You feel very odd going in a room. You are correct. We don't go in other people's rooms, and we do not mix with the other grade levels. It does departmentalize you, and I mean, that's the truth. I mean, that's a lot. No, and I know the culture in our elementaries is very celebrational. You know, the PSO is very loving, and will that separate you? Yes, it does. I'm telling you. I've seen it. There's a place downstairs in ours, but that's like for the recess monitors who will come in. So the teachers kind of have the dedicated pod areas. So you are right, you are thinking, and that is what happens. I don't know how you would change it because the area is not big enough to put all of you in that. So.
Let the architect say something.
But again, this is programming, and so these are programming questions, and the programming comes down, and I have challenged the administrators that are going to be in this building to say to them, you have a huge task. You have got to make sure that this building, everyone feels like a family, and so that's a programming. We have space for the whole staff. The cafeteria is at 600 people. Staff meetings, there's going to be about 150 of you. Guess where your staff meetings are going to be? They're going to be together in the cafeteria. So it is up to our building principals to develop that family feel that all of you are used to right now. And I know they're going to do that for you, because we recognize that while this, you know, having these grade level is best for instruction, and let's remember, we're designing this building what's best for instruction for our kiddos. This is the best design for instruction. It may not be the best design for us as adults, but it is up to us to create that culture, to create that family feel, and it is up to our administrators to make sure that that happens. And I know they can do it.
I have a couple questions. The first one is, did you say that in the teacher workspace that's where our computers will be?
No, I just spoke.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
My fault.
Because I know it moved away from that.
We did.
We did.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You've been listening.
Parking spots for staff, and like where do those go, and about how many will there be?
What, I'm sorry?
Parking spots for staff?
There's a second.
We saw visitors, and I saw the bus
This is visitors here, so we've got this big additional parking lot.
So I'm sorry.
We've got this parking
Staff
lot.
parking right next to the building.
So are we like in that bottom half, you think?
Right there.
This is visitors right up next to the entrance.
Oh,
This
the entrance
is
is at
it.
the bottom. I mean, the bottom of the picture.
Yep. This is the entrance. This is visitors. Yep.
We haven't gone through the paces of talking about entry and all that kind of stuff. There will be certain doors that teachers can get into, given a pass or a key fob or whatnot, that isn't accessible for students. So you'll be able to get in where you're close to where you're parking.
Okay, and then my last question is, can you go back to the one that had the map of like where all the classrooms and things were? The floor plan.
I like that.
I'm a special ed teacher, I've been teaching for 32 years. I keep bringing up this concern, and I just feel like it's not going anywhere. We typically have, and I teach 4th and 5th grade, we typically have 4 resource rooms between 4th and 5th grade. Currently, you have 2. If we end up having an extra gen ed classroom above the 10, and right now our 4th and 5th sit at 12 and 11, so we're already over by 3 there. And then if we go over 2 resource rooms, that's 5 extra classrooms just between 4th and 5th. So, my concern, I guess I just don't understand why we keep, the only thing that is not movable, and you guys have been awesome about, and you guys too, members had input, so we appreciate that. You guys have been awesome about moving all kinds of stuff around, and I know you've made a ton of changes, and we appreciate that. But the one thing that just never seems to change are these large group areas. And I've been at just about every one of these meetings, including the focus group at the beginning, and I am not hearing, I'm hearing large group. I'm not hearing that many large group, especially if it's at the cost of potential classrooms in the future where people are not going to possibly have the same structure. And having taught here many years, and I've shared this with many people here, special ed always seems to get whatever's left. And I get that because gen ed classes are bigger, so I totally understand that. And in the current buildings we have, we've been very limited by what we have, and so I blame no one, we go where we need to go. But we're building a brand new building, and we know that we have a lot of resource rooms for kids, and those numbers continue to track the same. So, I just don't understand why we can't capture back some of those large group areas to even get maybe 2 extra classrooms and still have some large group space, or have the ability between like a pair of classrooms that they have a movable walls between them, so that can become a large group space if you needed to do that. I just feel like nobody has ever said to me why this is a huge priority over classrooms. And I've heard it said many times that this building is going to last for 100 years, long after we're all gone. Your projections, I don't think, go 100 years. And I've heard Joelle say, and I agree with you, that it's about instruction. So if it's about instruction, people need to have those classrooms. And I thought, and so I must admit it, I know that I'm like a broken record, but it really bothers me because we are not going to stay at 10 classrooms at 4th and 10, and this is my area of expertise, so I apologize I'm not speaking at the lower levels. And 1 resource room for 4th. It's just not going to happen. It's not happening now. It's not going to happen for 100 years. So why can't we now turn some of all that big area space that's not going to be used as much as classrooms all day, every day, into just a couple of extra classrooms? There's still spaces where you can take groups in to do things if nobody's assigned there. So I'm very long-winded. I apologize, but I didn't get it all my chest.
I understand. I appreciate the question. So I think we're kind of misjudging how big those central spaces are. They're not big enough to simply carve out 2 more classrooms and then still have a place to collaborate. So it's just big enough to provide a collaboration room. The school and the number of classrooms are sized for the student population. It's not sized for the number of teachers we have. So it's set up to teach 1,500 students, and that can fluctuate by another kid per classroom, another child per classroom, two more per classroom, or whatever. It can fluctuate that way as well, and there's flexible spaces to be able to use. But we had to go off of some model. We had to design to some number, and that's the number that we designed to. So, and I get more classrooms, but I think we've maximized the number of classrooms. We'd be overbuilding if we built 2 more classrooms per grade.
But we're already at, if you do the 4 resource rooms we have, and the 4th and 5th grade, that's 27 full-size classrooms that we need. You're showing
27 per grade?
No, altogether between 4th and 5th.
Okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong, so you're between resource rooms and gen ed classrooms, you're showing 22, we currently have 27. Where would you put 5 extra classrooms?
How many kids are in each one of those 27 rooms?
In the gen ed classrooms, I think that's roughly 25, 26, I don't know if there's anybody here before the 5th. We've gone as high as 28, 29. Resource rooms can max out at 16.
So are there 16 in all those classrooms and 25, 26, 27 in all the other classrooms?
Oh, there's 26, 27 for sure in all the gen ed classrooms, potentially more. The resource rooms, some of them are creeping up to 16. And the issue is because you can't go over 16, it's that multiple of 16. So even if you get 33, you have to have 3 classrooms.
Yeah, the numbers don't jive with our numbers. That's the problem right here is that if you take 25, 26, 27 times that many classrooms and then add 16 per resource room, that's way more kids than what we're designing for.
So that's the problem.
I agree. What I'm saying is I don't think we have that many kids in the class.
You don't?
Well, we got the current enrollment data and it doesn't show that. So the way we dealt with special ed is by providing resource rooms, but then also providing multiple small group rooms that you can pull multiple kids in. So those ones aren't going to fit 16 at one time, but certainly the resource rooms will.
But if we need 2 resource rooms per grade level, you don't have 2 resource rooms per grade level.
As it currently stands, you're correct. There's other spaces you could use if you're going to use them at exactly the same time.
We have to, by law, we have to have comparable spaces to the gen ed.
Understand, and I think there are comparable spaces, but I don't think that you have 25, 26, 27 kids in all of the general classrooms and 16 in both resources. The numbers just don't add up.
I mean, I'm in the building every day. I don't know where you could, but you're incorrect.
Okay.
Mrs. Allen, we will look into that,
Thank
okay?
you. I appreciate that.
We heard what you said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I could redirect maybe some more about community-based question that I received from a friend of mine who is actually not in attendance, but she is currently involved with the Highland Island, over in Highland Elementary, and she was curious as to know what exterior space might be dedicated to those types of efforts.
We are not planning anything outside. So that.
But you've got opportunities.
Yeah, there's tons of opportunities.
So we've got the courtyard spaces that we talked about. That's more of a secure outdoor space, but we've got lots of space around the building that we can carve out for any one of these things.
Thank you.
How far over on that property does the school property go? Or like where do the wetlands and how far over do we, can you just?
This is the edge of the property. There is a ravine essentially that runs through here.
So when you say wetlands, how far up does that come to the property? I was curious where that.
Coverage is a lot. It's mostly.
I know, that's what I was thinking what it was.
It's not like solid. It's called a mosaic, so it's a little spotty. It's a percentage.
The property boundary will run literally through the building, right to where the field house is, and the district will have approximately 25 acres of the 70 property.
You may have addressed this already, but storage of students' personal articles like jackets, coats, and backpacks. Did you guys show you?
Yeah, we did. We can show you too.
So we've got these in all these, in the kindergarten and first grade, they've got their cubbies and stuff inside the classrooms. In these other cluster areas, we have these banks that are outside of each classroom.
So they're in that common space. They're in a common space outside of the classroom, not in a hallway like they are today. Correct.
So the flex space has to be used for a classroom, from the lockers in the classroom.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So I mean, by looking at some of the numbers, I mean, number-wise, I mean, I'm on board with the classroom size. I guess I don't understand, like, you could take a classroom and make it a flex space down the road if you don't need a classroom. But how do you take a flex space and make it a classroom when there are lockers in it, when there are children walking through it, and all of those things?
Yeah, so it's about, and this goes back to, even all the way back to the corporate design. Well, the thinking is that you're designing for different types of activities. So there's a space to go to if you're deciding to be active, and you may teach that way during that time, knowing that there may be a child who comes out to use his locker during class time.
In the corporate world, this common space is your flexible space, right? And what I've seen is, in a lot of ways, the cafeteria at certain companies, Signet Jewelers would be an example, the cafeterias are flex space. There is meetings that happen in the cafeteria. It may be a group of 4, it may be a group of 8, it may be a group of 12, but there's a little entranceway there, and then there's high top tables. And so you know if you're having a private meeting, you don't have it in the cafeteria, but if you don't have access to these other rooms or other spaces, you go to the cafeteria or whatever.
I see what you're saying. I've worked in the corporate world, I've worked in athletics as well. So my big issue is if you pull up the numbers right now, you can go to the projected enrollment numbers. Our son's going to be in 2nd grade when this building opens. Will be kindergarten this fall. The numbers don't match up because right now, if I have it right, keep going.
Yeah, try.
Yeah. Go back one. There you go. So 2nd grade, you're looking at 269. So you're already taking one of those collaborative rooms and having to make that a classroom. That's the problem.
And I would assume it's a fairly accurate number, because I would assume that's based off kindergarten enrollment that is occurred.
Yes, it's a study.
4 hours.
It's a blending of 5 or 6 different studies that work.
You said your son's in kindergarten right now, sir?
No.
He will be.
He will be in...
This fall.
He'll be in kindergarten. So our kindergarten numbers are 221. So you take that and roll it up to 2nd grade, it's 221 in 2nd grade, it's not 269. That 269 will be in 5th grade.
Okay. That's not clear in that document.
Well, I mean, it's clear in terms of, you know,
I'm looking at as when the building opens, I'm looking at this spreadsheet that's saying 2nd grade is 269. My son would be in 2nd grade. When
I see what you're saying. Yeah, but...
So if you're saying this is for 2019-2020 school year, that should be noted on the document.
Point taken, thank you.
You know, but to his point though, so if you just look at 2nd grade, even if, so let's say the building were open next year, and those numbers.
You still have the same issue.
Exactly. I mean, if you're going to put 23 kids in a class and you have 269 in 2nd grade, just presuming for the sake of argument, that was the number at the fall when the building opened, you will have to take both of those collaborative spaces.
How are they incorrect in their thought process, what they're saying?
Well, you're never going to design an exact number of classrooms for every single grade. The only way to do that is to put 20 classrooms in every grade. Never good, right?
Well, no, that's inefficient, and I understand. But you have a starting number, right?
1,500.
The math works, but it's not working with what you've come up with. And you're building a brand new building, and you're saying, okay, we're going to put, our goal is 23-to-1 ratio. Okay, but you're already going to use one of those collaborative spaces as a classroom. You have to do it. And you're in a brand new building, so how is that fair when you open the building and these kids are going to be so excited and, you know, 25 of them, let's say, even if you bumped it up, oh, I have to be in the flex space.
But that's, you're thinking about it like a flex space. There are districts that they absolutely program that collaborative space. You can call it whatever you want. You can use it however you want. You can use it part of the day. You don't have to call that your classroom for the entire year. You could be moving with kids and changing classrooms. There's a lot of programmatic and temporal things to solve that, but you have to have the space to account for bubble classes, for bubble years where we have to get them.
If every child is only in a classroom, you're saying a classroom that's 27.
But
But remember, you have no student in the art room, no student in the music room, no student in the media center, no student in the gym.
We don't.
So maybe for homeroom, you might have an issue. But if you have students in other spaces in the building, you're going to net out closer to that 23 to 1 because some portion of half the second grade is going to be other places at various times because they have art, they have music. Do they do media center or library, whatever we call those things? There are other spaces in the building that can accommodate hundreds of kids.
So to their point though, that's only for like one period of the day. Then they'll come back to that space and they're at that number. So I understand the flow, but it doesn't work that way in elementary. We don't have homeroom, we stay there all the time. So that's what I hear what you're saying, am I correct?
Moving at one time. So I guess in my mind, just for your sake, right now in 5th grade, we don't eat lunch all together. Only 2 classes go, 4 classes go down at a time. But so that's why I guess we're all thinking people are going to be walking through this collaborative space all the time because everyone's on a different schedule. Or is everyone moving? This whole entire pod is going to move at one time. So because I heard you at one point say, well, no, everyone's moving at one time, and that's the only way that can work in my mind. Otherwise,
So you have to flex with the number of kids you have, right? So part of this professional development, part of the scheduling and the temporal aspect of the building, meaning you're using certain spaces at certain times, have to come into play. So with the projections that you're going to be on a steady decline in enrollment, eventually you get to a point where you can take an entire, you can leave a whole section of the building empty and move as a whole class and so on. As soon as you cut the ribbon on the building, you may have some classes where you can't move all at the same time. You have to stay open where some things are, they come back and another group goes to Earth and so on. That's all scheduling kind of stuff. You never want to, I think we'd be overbuilding to the detriment of taxpayer dollars if we decided to create overbuild classrooms that would.
It's not your trouble, your math doesn't work up there. Sure, but there's not a description because, as they said, 269 divided by 10 doesn't.
Well,
it does for 5th grade, which is when that number is going to be.
Well, I understand, right? But we've localized it because we don't know when those valleys and the peaks and valleys are. This is a guess.
Well, the current enrollment is exact. So then there's a little layover on it to say, let's just assume those classes may grow because we may have some people moving in and out of
Right,
the
and once again, this goes to the layout of this.
Okay, but I'm just
But
saying.
you're saying projected enrollment, 2nd grade, as the gentleman said, these numbers need to shift down because you're saying the actual enrollment is 233 and the 269, is that 222, is that the 221 moved down 2 years?
So I'm gonna suggest a couple things. I mean, after looking at that and because we pulled numbers today. So we have actuals, these are projected. These numbers that were projected were given to TDA when this project started. So if you think about when this project started last May, they are projected, it's like the 5-year forecast. You project out what you think. Actual numbers sitting, so if what the gentleman, what you had said, sir, right now in kindergarten we have 225. So when those kids, when the building opens, those kids will now currently be in 2nd grade. So our actual number is 225 for 2nd grade. So I'm going to suggest that maybe, that was a typo because nowhere on our, current enrollment do we have that number.
225 plus 20%.
This
because you have 225
3 years ago.
We are assuming, well.
You can't assume.
You can't assume, right? I get it.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity to revisit this because the enrollment numbers that we just had pulled today are north of what's on there. So we need to kind of circle back and see, because the last thing we want to do is open up and already be using the collaborative spaces for full-time classrooms. So we have a little bit of homework to do to vet this out and see where the alignment is with our numbers and maybe take a look at where it's heading, right? Because again, it was declining, and what we're seeing is now these numbers are higher, which means at least in pre-K through 5, we're ticking up. So,
But Mark, I think you mentioned too, is we do have other options outside of this business, the building, right? So we're not pigeonholed, we're only pigeonholed by our thought process. And
right, but we're early enough in this process where we still have opportunity to make change, which is part of the reason why we're having this meeting. We're trying to say, okay, let's make sure everybody's voice is heard and see if we're on the right track and everything's good.
And the other thing is, yes, we have other opportunities, but we got this bond saying that this was a P through 5 building, and I know the majority of this board feels very strongly that we aren't going to mislead the public. That's exactly what it is. So we're not going to change
Right,
it. So we have to make sure, to Mr. Dozen's point, that we have this right, because that's what we said.
Yeah, we hate to have it wrong the day before.
Right. So that's where we're at, and that's why we're having this.
There's a lot more questions.
Let me totally change the topic here. Can you give an update on the site with the wetland mitigation, where that's at, the credits that are need to be acquired, if it's from the city or from the school district, that along with how that ties into when the permits will be acquired? I know you talked about October possibly starting construction. So if you could give an update on that.
Yeah, so the total update is way back in the board when we first found out about this, we had the wetlands consultant put together a schedule. And he said, it looks like you can break ground next May. And we're like, whoa, 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 holy cow, we want to start much earlier. So when I presented that to the Board of Education, if you remember back then. Now, since then, the city has worked with the wetlands consultant to do what's called an expedited permit. So they're trying to expedite it, and we're hoping for October, but there's two agencies, there's the Ohio EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They work independently of one another. One finishes early, the other still have to take the length of the longest one. So you have to get permits from both to start the wetlands process. Both of them have approved an expedited permit, so that's why we're hopeful that this October will work. But if it doesn't, we're just at the mercy of them. As far as the purchase of the wetlands credits, do we know yet where?
The city has purchased some of them already, but they're handling that. I mean, I think they approved 375. My memory, and I could be off a little bit, I think they approved purchasing $375,000 worth of credits at their February council meeting. So they're working on purchasing those credits, working with other entities that have them.
But the city is going to purchase all the credits, and
they're taking the lead on that process.
And then, is there any bad complications with cutting trees?
There's the potential for that. Yes, which means you can only cut trees between
October 15 and April 1.
Yeah, right. So you have to cut on the north side and south side of that timeline. So yes, absolutely.
So we're hoping October 16th, we have the green light to cut it down.
And we're doing North Royalton Elementary School. They're also on the wetlands. They got their wetlands permit literally a week before the deadline, and they knocked down 12 acres in 2 days. So
you have to just knock it down. You don't have to remove them.
Yeah, we're going through it right now. I need to. They cut all the trees down.
We're going to post for lumberjacks if any, and have them ready to go in the tree in the woods on October 16th. So if you guys want, bring a chainsaw, we'll have a party.
What could go wrong there?
I know, right?
Sounds like a problem.
That's right. I know. That's right. It's authentic learning at its best.
Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Just a real quick one. I think it kind of glossed over, or I didn't hear it. Obviously, you got one shot to do it, and you want to do it as best as you can. And thank you for taking the time and doing your due diligence on everything. At some point, it may come up where you have to expand. Hopefully, that's the case. In looking at the plan, I kind of struggle with how you would do that. And I know it's probably been a high-level discussion, but you wouldn't go to the south because then you're running into the field house. How would you handle expansion?
You could either expand by adding a whole grade house, either a single floor or a second floor connected by a corridor, much as these lay out, or you could actually expand onto the end of these wings. There's a lot of different ideas. The other idea is move pre-K out and put kindergarten, pre-K, you can do a lot of different things by expanding.
No, that's fair.
And don't forget, as Mr. Dosen said earlier, we have additional space in our middle school and high school. So if it's looking even big picture, if there wasn't the ability to actually add onto the building, we can do some different types of configuration to allow for more space wherever we need it in the district.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
I just wanted to mention, just while we have this nice public forum, that the art room is the original maker space. We make things there all the time. We problem solve all the time. We speak to the kids' heart and soul and touch parts of their creativity that tech doesn't get. So when I hear about this digital tech world, that scares me a little bit, because I truly always believe that 6th grade and up is the time to do digital art, and the kids need that fine motor skills. They need to know how to draw and shade with their hands to develop that skill, which also then promotes cognitive development. So when I see the 2 art rooms, yay, thank you. The 2, I believe both of them have storage rooms, or is there only one storage room? 2, and 2 kiln rooms. But when I'm doing the math, I still don't know how we get that many classes to art class once a week without having a 3rd art room and a 3rd art teacher. Now again, I'm doing the math, so please give me a little knowledge of that. But I just don't see it, and I think we need 3 messy spaces. The kids, they come to me not knowing how to use scissors and glue anymore because it's too messy at home. And then they're attached to their devices. I need to grab them in this K-5 time to give them that experience. And we have to remember the amount that we specialists, music, PE, make connections with the kids. Are we going to give to our teachers 800 students to look after? Or am I going to have the 500-ish around that I have? I know when so-and-so is, getting a new puppy. I know so-and-so is having a new baby at home. I have the connections with the kids. I don't want to have them as numbers, just coming into my room and spitting out art product. I just wanted to say that.
No, that's a good point.
I have to make one comment. I mean, if I don't have kids who are going to be going to the school. My last graduating this year, but I would be so excited about that common area, that area, the collaborative area that's in each one of those communities. And I guess I'm looking back to what we've all said about possible other configurations down the road, if we need to, or expansions. And I think one of the things, the big drawing about, and I just get excited about it, I think of elementary teachers. First of all, kids, they want to have an area where they can feel comfortable with their home, but then they want to get out. And so I would say I'm hoping that we'll, at all possible, we want to protect those areas, those common areas, because that's where you're going to see 21st century classroom. That they're not going to be sitting in those 10 classrooms. I can see them be out there all the time. But if we put a classroom in there, it's really going to allow you strength on that. It's going to handle what they can do and what they will do. I think it's really important as we go forward that we talk about, well, kids too big, we'll use one of those areas, but we can't, because that's where we're going to see such a true impact on these kids, is to be out there and be creative and do what we need to do in those spaces. And that's just not a question. I'm sorry for taking the time. I just think that's, when I see that, I get really excited about it. And I'm concerned, hearing some good things from you as well. I hear especially Mr. Doski said, there might be different configurations we have to, all right? And I just love that space. And I think, especially for elementary school, the kids would love it. And we got to protect it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else?
So a question, I don't know if it's premature, but like in terms of the site connectivity, are you integrating like path sidewalks for connections to the tow path that's along, the path that's along Valley Parkway, as well as at least providing within your footprint, sidewalks? Because I'm just thinking some of the older, fourth, fifth grade at Central, a lot of these kids will walk or bike to and from school. And I can see, obviously, the connection to the trail along Valley Parkway would be very important to very strategically integrate that so that, they're safe as they're navigating cars coming in and out of there. And then I can see the potential where, kids in Central used to go to McDonald's when it was there, or they'll walk to some of those areas around there. They may head up North Glenwood Trail to all that developmental as well as the path and the sidewalks that are going to be developed there.
So we're working with the Metro Parks because that entryway off of there is through their property. And so one of the things that they asked us to do was to put a bike trail along that entryway from, so the bus entrance right here. So that's currently in the project as part of the plans. There's also sidewalks that loop around the whole entire site of our school. So there'll be like a wellness trail. We envision, setting up something so there could be walking. We are also in the process of writing a Safe Routes to School grant. You'll be getting a link to a survey that we're asking parents to take on that, hopefully to get some federal and state dollars to create some more sidewalks along the entryways to get into and access the school. So we're working on all of those things, but currently projected there are sidewalks around the site as well as a path that will go from the Valley Parkway up to the entrance.
And Joel, did the city, I don't know what the city is, but are they going to, have they talked about putting sidewalks on Glenwood Trail?
So we're working with both Broadview Heights and Brecksville collaboratively on this Safe Routes to School grant. And so we're trying to secure some funding first for them to then develop. And part of that development is that you have to develop a traffic plan for the site and how you will get there walking or biking or by car, what have you. And so we're in the process of doing that. How each city is going to respond or what they want to do on their infrastructure is going to be up to them. But collaboratively, we're working to secure monies where all cities and stakeholders can benefit from having some additional walkways and bike paths.
I do have a question. I guess I didn't realize that Highland Island is at the garden area. So it just seems, so I went to Hilton. And I remember Mrs. Pillage taking us outside. I don't know with safety if you can really do a lot of outside teaching anymore. But if I recall correctly, I think all of the current elementary schools are not kind of like blocked by, like it looks fairly landlocked with roads. And I'm just wondering if there's a garden and all these kind of pods. It just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of green space other than far away from the classrooms. Like, I mean, I can't tell how wide that is, but like, is there going to be space for the garden, but then also that the art fest can go outside for 5th grade, and then like the kindergartners are playing outside? Like, it just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of green space. And when they built this school, I remember it being called like a prison. Like, it looks, that's what the whole community kind of called it. So I just don't want it to seem like kind of sterile and institutional, and just, concrete everywhere, and they have to go across. How wide is that concrete bus parking lot to get to the playground? Which also, if they're taking the playground set from Hilton, how many kids currently use that and how many kids are going to be using it? I'm a little concerned. I'd like to see more play brought into the school, and it just seems fairly limited.
So we will have additional play. We are taking the Hilton because it was a gift of the PSO, and it's very, so we're taking that as part of the equipment. There will also be additional equipment purchased for that. And so we're looking at that. There is a ton of green space around. There's courtyards. The courtyard is huge. I know you can't really envision it now, so there's a space right inside, a secured space to put gardens if need be. There's some green space outside of the field house that we have that could be used for multiple things. We also, and you can't see it on here, but one of the neat things we're doing for the music rooms, they sit in the front of the buildings. They will have doors that can open and have an outdoor kind of stage built right under the school, so the kids could actually walk out of the music room, perform outside, and there's built-in natural seating that could go there, so kind of like an outside Blossom Music Center type of venue. And so we're trying to incorporate as many outside possibilities into our design and into the curriculum as we can to allow for some of these things that are traditional programming that are very important to us and to our kids, so that we can continue those programmings at the new school.
Outdoor learning was one of the top priorities that came out of our educational vision session, and you're so fortunate to have this site. So some of this might be scale, but you've got acres of woods to run around in and do cool stuff. And I think that just the example of the music room is a great example of just taking advantage of that inside-outside transitional space. So appreciate the comment.
I have a question, this is from the parents' perspective. Let's say you go back to the drawing board and you look at the enrollment numbers and the projections and you have to rework it and you realize you need more than 10 classrooms right off the bat. Will there still be the flexibility of possibly removing the preschool, or is that not even a topic of discussion? Or to trade it off for
The board has made a decision on that, and the answer is no at this point. We haven't even entertained that discussion because we told the taxpayers this was a P through 5 building. Just to point out, preschool is an optional thing for a district to have. It's not required. We're required to service the children who are special, need early intervention, but it's not a requirement, and we have a lot of wonderful preschools in this area. So this board made the decision to be true to what it put on the ballot. So at this point, no.
The only comment I would add on to that is this is a fluid situation. You don't know what you don't know. So, you know, I wouldn't arbitrarily take any option off the table right now and say absolutely 100% we're never going to do that. You know, we have a set budget. So, right, if we run into some unforeseen situation and, you know, we're way out of line with the budget because something happens, you know, you got to look at, you know, you might have to expand what you look at, so.
The majority of the board.
Could you go back to the floor plan again? So there's nothing above on the second floor of the pre-K space. There's nothing above the cafeteria and the main entrance. Could those be built upon?
Those are extra tall spaces. That's why there's nothing above it.
Could they be less tall and put something on?
I wouldn't there, but you could on the preschool. You could build that 2 stories.
Okay, so there's some space there.
Sure.
For the art room.
You go, Mrs. Moore.
I just one comment in regards to the numbers and exactly what Mr. Arnold left, but like when you're thinking about this overflow of going into these collaborative spaces, I as well love the idea of having a collaborative space and like having that, but I'm also leery of these numbers, and my concern is that we protect the collaborative space and yet we need more space, but there's, say, an empty room in another pod. And now all of a sudden this grade house has a classroom that's an island in another pod. That may, you know, like, because these are so podded off. Like, they're not like, kind of like, I don't know, thinking of North Royalton's middle school, like, they have pods, but they're kind of flow into the next pod. So if you, when they needed to bubble over their classrooms and a class had to go to another pod, they were just like right there. This is like so isolated off and just, like, I'm just thinking outside the box, like we're trying to do, like, okay, let's protect that collaborative space. What else can we do? Well, there's an empty classroom somewhere else, but, so I don't know, just think about that as you're looking at numbers. Like, that's what we're used to doing is, so the next thing you know, I mean, when I started teaching, I was in the music room, and I was on the other side of the building from the kindergartens, and I didn't get to know my teachers, and my students had a harder time getting to know theirs. Like, I've done that, we've done this in the district, and so as we're, you know, Mr. Dozen's saying, we're looking at this, it's a fluid situation right now. Please bear that in mind, like, please don't, like, think of going back to that whole, there might be another room in another pod.
Sure.
This makes me nervous.
So that's why, so the competing priorities were don't design a building with everything together because we want to break down the population. So that's a competing priority with being able to just simply switch real quick. So our priority is to make a 2-story with a grade on each floor. So if you needed to flex into a classroom just directly above the stairwell, maybe that was closer than going next to a pod. So
just asking,
no,
thinking with everybody, like the fluidity of this.
We need to do our homework because we need to make sure we have it right. So that's what we heard tonight.
And then one tiny question: where were somebody asked me the exit door? You were talking about safety and security. I didn't get to that. You know, I get to hear my babies. Where in the kindergarten wing are my exit doors to get outside?
The end of each. So right there, and right there.
And then we can potentially do.
That's what I was going to ask, is a collaborative space in the middle, because that's kind of, okay.
Well, the nice thing about this is you might actually be able to get out to use, what is this?
And then to the classrooms, how do you get to the courtyards?
Yeah,
Where are
green
they?
space right there too. So what we were just talking about is that if we pop a door in there, you might be able to get out and use this green space right here, which might be a
That was
nice opportunity.
my next question was, is there green space for kindergarten on that? And how do I get to those cool courtyards?
There's right here.
Yep, and then
Oh, okay.
one off the knees.
Yeah, right here.
Okay, so, and then the classrooms that are attached to the courtyards, they don't have entrances or exits into the courtyards?
Right now they don't, however, this being an art room, we may want to do that. Outdoor.
Anything else? All right. Okay, so hopefully we did right by all of you in our community. So thank you for coming. We need to do some homework. We need to make sure we get this right, and we are going to do that, I promise you.
Given that it appears we have quite a bit of homework to do, are we jeopardizing the 21-22 school year opening that was projected for the bond?
Yep. The more time we stop, more time things will happen, and we're on schedule, so absolutely.
Yeah.
You're also still limited by those permits too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, right now, we stopped everything 3 weeks ago, and we're waiting to produce the design development estimates to the Board of Education and the design. This is the design, the estimates along with that, and that'll put numbers to this design.
Sure.
Once we receive formal approval, then we won't proceed into the next phase, the last phase of design, until we get approval from the board.
All right, well, we want to get it right, so we will do what we have to do, and that's what we do as board members. So thank you very much for your time, and the public engagement meeting is over. Thank you.
You have one agenda item.
We have one more agenda item.
Yeah, I know that. I just wanted to excuse everybody.
I still love my blue erasers. I love those. Like, they're in my class, they're like weird.
We have a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation.
All right,
Fred moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Just a second. All right.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mrs. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler, yes. Mr. Dosen.
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mrs. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Ziegler, yes. Mr. Dosen.
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. Announcement. We have an announcement. Our next meeting will be April 24th, 2019. Hope to see you all there.
Thank you all. Thank you for
Thank you. Yeah, a little bit.